The sea doesn't forgive. It keeps the wrecks, the screams, the prayers swallowed whole. Lighthouse keepers see what you're not meant to. Shadows that move in the beam, voices that rise with the tide. And sometimes, they don't come back the same. These are the most disturbing true lighthouse keeper horror stories. Etched into logbooks, carried on the wind, and told in salt-whispered warnings for a reason. Listen close, but never stare too long into the light. The cliff feels wrong the moment I set foot on it. The kind of ground that has tasted too much blood, too much salt, and kept it buried in its stone. The lighthouse rises from the jagged rocks like a bone snapped and left to heal crooked, its paint long stripped away by storms, its iron rusted into streaks that look like dried blood down the walls. They told me the place had been abandoned for decades. The last keeper left without word, and no one dared take his place. The sea has a way of claiming what belongs to it, they said, and some things it refuses to give back. The villagers warned me about the lamp. Not about the storms, not about the endless climb of the spiral stairs, not even about the loneliness that gnaws at a keeper until he starts to hear his own name in the gull's cries. No. They only warned me about the lamp. They said it lights itself. No hand, no flame, no oil needed. That it burns at odd hours when the fog swallows the coast, glowing white as bone through the mist, though no one has touched it in years. They whispered it as though saying too much would draw the beam down upon them. I smiled politely, pretending I did not feel the weight of their stares pressing me to turn back. I should have listened. The first night, the wind was quiet, the sea a black mirror. I set down my bag in the small keeper's room, the mattress damp with mildew, the walls coated in salt like veins crawling through plaster. I meant to rest, to prove to myself the place was only stone and glass. But then the fog rolled in, sudden, thick, the kind that swallows sound as easily as sight. And through it, without warning, the lantern flared. A blade of white light cut across the sea, slicing the mist into glowing sheets. My chest tightened. I had not touched it. I had not even climbed the tower yet. The stairs groaned under me as I ascended, the kind of groan that makes you feel the whole place resents your presence. Dust thickened with every step, cobwebs breaking across my face like cold fingers. The air smelled of iron, sharp and old. Higher, and the beam widened, spilling across the glass, brighter than any flame I had ever seen. My heart pounded as I pushed into the lantern room. The reservoir sat in its place, a basin of rusted iron. I leaned close, expecting the faint, oily sheen, the scent of fuel. But it was bone dry. No wick, no oil, no reason for the blaze to exist. Yet there it was, white and furious, alive with something that was not fire. It hummed low in my chest, a sound that was not sound, but a pulse, like a heartbeat that was not mine. And in that moment, staring into the impossible flame, I knew the villagers had not been warning me of a superstition. They had been warning me of something that waited, patient and hungry, in the light. By midnight, the air in the tower is heavy, pressed down with a weight that has nothing to do with the sea. I had tried to sleep, wrapping myself in damp blankets that smelled of mold, but the glow leaking through the cracks of my door made it impossible. The lantern above should have been silent, a dead relic perched on its iron spine. Instead, it groaned with life. I heard it before I saw it, the faint rattle of glass, the cough of flame. It was sputtering, as though choking on something more than air. I climbed, each step trembling under my boots. The higher I went, the louder it became. Not just the hiss of fire, but a sound beneath it, a muffled rhythm, like fists striking the glass from the inside. When I reached the lantern room, the air burned cold. The flame threw shadows across the walls that moved like restless figures, jerking and writhing, reaching for the floor. The glass shook as if struck by unseen hands, rattling in its frame, and the light inside surged, dimmed, surged again, like a creature fighting to breathe. I leaned closer, close enough that the heat should have blistered my skin. But there was no heat, only the vibration, trembling against my bones. And then I heard them, whispers. They slipped out between the sputters, caught and broken in the flame, words dragged across water. Names, dozens, hundreds, murmured in 1,000 voices, layered atop one another until they became a tide of sound that rose and fell with the pulsing light. I recognized some of them. Names I had heard in the village tavern, whispered over mugs of ale, stories of ships lost to the rocks below this cliff. The mariner's hope, gone with 20 souls in a storm. The Selena, shattered when its captain misjudged the reef. Others I did not know, but I felt them all the same. Drowned sailors, their lives ended on the jagged teeth of the shore. Their voices clung to the light, trapped, burning without fuel, without end. The flame grew wilder, licking against the glass as though desperate to speak. And then, through the tide of voices, I heard a name I knew too well. My body went rigid, every hair rising along my arms. It said my name. Once, then again, slower, deliberate, carved into the silence between the whispers. My breath caught. I told myself it was imagination, the echo of my own fear bouncing back from the sea. But then I saw it, etched into the dust that caked the base of the lantern, written in a shaky, frantic scrawl, the letters gouged into the grime by some desperate hand. My name. The letters were fresh. The dust around them still shifted loose, as if someone had stood here moments before me, hunched low, scratching them into the iron with broken nails. My pulse hammered in my ears. I staggered back, bumping against the cold wall, eyes locked on the impossible script. The whispers swelled, louder now, no longer muttering but chanting, overlapping until the sound pressed against me like a rising tide. The glass rattled harder, as though the flame would burst, free, carrying every voice with it. I covered my ears, but it did nothing. The names poured into me, filling the hollow spaces inside my chest, pressing against the fragile walls of my skull. I shouted for silence, but my voice was swallowed whole. The flame seemed to hear because it paused, only for a heartbeat. In that brief stillness, I saw its shapes in the glass. Faces twisted in the burn, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with fury or despair. They stared out at me, dozens of them, overlapping, fighting for space. And in every reflection, I saw the same thing. They were waiting for me to take my place among them. And as the glass rattled again, as the light flared white and furious, I felt the weight of the cliff beneath me, the sea below, and the certain knowledge that the lamp does not just remember the dead. It calls for the living. And it had already written my name. By the third night, the tower no longer feels like stone and iron, but something breathing, something aware of me. The flame has grown bold. Its whispers sharpen, no longer muffled fragments, but words twisted with intention. Some plead, their voices ragged with despair, begging me to free them. Others curse me in tongues I do not recognize, spitting venom through the glass. And a few bargain, offering promises in tones slick as oil, if only I will give myself to the fire. Their words seep into my dreams, though I have not closed my eyes in days. I tried to smother it. I dragged an old canvas from the storage room, thick and damp with mildew, and heaved it over the lantern's lens. For a moment, the tower darkened, shadows swallowing the walls. Then, with no spark, no ember, the cloth erupted. The canvas curled and shriveled in an instant, flames racing like hungry fingers, leaving nothing but drifting black flakes that clung to my skin. The beam cut across the night once more, stronger, as if mocking me. I cannot rest. Even locked in my chamber far below, the light bleeds through. It leaks around the cracks of the door, floods the windows, though the shutters are bolted. I close my eyes and still I see it, a white brand against the back of my lids. Sleep never comes, only the endless glow and the smell. The smell is the worst. It began faint, the acrid tang of burnt hair, of charred skin. Now it fills every breath, thick and rancid, as if the walls themselves have been steeped in smoke from burning flesh. It clings to my clothes, my hair, my sheets, until I gag on it. Yet when I search for the source, there are no ashes, no bodies, only the scent, ghostly and unshakable, whispering of fires that have claimed more than wood. Last night I woke, or thought I woke, to find fingerprints streaked in soot across the frame of my bed. Black smears, fresh and greasy. 5 distinct marks pressed into the wood, as though someone had stood above me while I slept. My hands trembled as I held them beside the stains, praying they would match. They did not. The prints were longer, thinner, scorched, as if the flesh that made them was still smoldering. I sleep alone. Yet the bed groans as though it bears another weight. The sheets tug in the night, tightening across my chest, pinning me as whispers coil against my ear. I tell myself I will leave at dawn, but when the sun rises, the light does not fade. It burns on, unyielding, filling the world as though it has erased the very sky. And I know, deep in my bones, it is not only guiding ships, it is hunting me. I could not take another night. The whispers, the soot, the smell of flesh that was not there. It pressed against me until I felt the walls lean in, the tower itself conspiring to cage me. My head throbbed from the endless glow that poured through my door and the unholy hum that rattled through my bones. I no longer thought of keeping the light. I thought only of killing it. The hammer felt absurd in my hand, a child's toy against something that had burned without fuel, without cause, for decades. Still, rage drove me up the spiral stairs, the echo of my boots sounding like a war drum. The lantern waited, pulsing with white fire, shadows writhing across the glass like faces pressed against prison bars. My own reflection wavered there, hollow-eyed, lips moving to whispers I had not spoken. I raised the hammer. My hand shook, not from weakness, but from the terrible certainty that it wanted me to strike, that it had been waiting all along. But I did it anyway. The hammer crashed against the glass with a shriek like tearing metal. Shards rained down in glittering arcs, scattering across the floor. For one impossible heartbeat, the flame flared so bright, I thought it would consume me whole. Then it guttered, hissed, and went out. The silence that followed was like the first breath after drowning. The tower groaned as though some long weight had lifted. Darkness settled over the room, honest and blessed, and relief surged through me so strong I nearly wept. I fell to my knees among the shards, gasping, feeling, for the first time since I arrived, free. I carried that relief down the stairs, my legs trembling with exhaustion, each step lighter without the fire's hum gnawing in my chest. At the bottom, I pressed open the heavy door and stepped into night. The sea air rushed over me, cool and salt-stung. For the first time in days, I thought I might breathe without tasting smoke. But then I saw it. The ocean was glowing, not with the pale green shimmer of plankton or the fleeting gleam of moonlight on waves. No, it was fire. Dozens, then hundreds of points of fire, blooming across the black water. They rose from the depths, bobbing on the surface like lanterns set adrift. At first, I thought they were torches. Then I saw the hands that held them. Figures broke the water, pale and rotted, their hair floating like kelp. Each one bore a flame, clenched in hands that should not grip. They lifted their heads in unison, eyes hollow sockets that reflected fire. Their anal mouths gaped, charred at the edges, opening and closing in silence, as if the sea itself had stolen their voices. Yet I heard them anyway, not with my ears, but inside my skull. Names pressed into my thoughts like nails. The same drowned sailors, the same voices that had whispered through the lantern, now crawling from their prison to stare up at me. Their torches burned without smoke, without fuel, just as the lighthouse had. The light flickered over their waterlogged faces, illuminating teeth blackened by the fire that refused to consume them. And every flame leaned toward the tower, like worshippers bowing before an altar. My relief curdled into dread so thick I nearly collapsed. The lantern above had not died. It had multiplied. Its hunger had spilled into the sea, igniting the drowned, dragging them back to bear its flame. And now, in their silent procession, they watched me with unblinking devotion. I stumbled backward into the tower, the door slamming against stone as though the building itself wished to shut me in. The glow from the sea seeped through the cracks, climbing the walls, filling the stairwell, until it seemed the ocean itself was rising to claim me. I understood then that smashing the glass had never killed the light. It had only set it free. By dawn, the sea had gone still again. The glowing figures had sunk back beneath the black water, their torches vanishing one by one, until only ripples marked where they had risen. I staggered from the window, shaking, praying the nightmare had dissolved with the tide. But when I climbed back to the lantern room, my heart froze. The light blazed once more. Stronger, hungrier. It burned with a brilliance I had never seen. White fire that bled through cracks in the shattered glass, as though the shards themselves had become mirrors of flame. The room pulsed with heatless light that pressed against my skin like invisible hands. The hammer I had wielded days earlier lay where I had dropped it, but its head was blackened, warped by something hotter than any earthly fire. The lantern had not died. It had fed. As I stepped closer, I saw my name. Not scratched faintly in dust this time. Not a whisper left by some long-gone hand. No. Now it was carved deep into the iron base of the lantern, gouged into the very metal as if by claws. The letters burned, glowing red, alive with embers. My name writhed there, each stroke pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The voices returned, clearer than ever. They no longer whispered. They breathed. Each inhale, each exhale, fanned the flame higher. I could hear lungs that had drowned long ago, lungs full of brine, gasping endlessly to feed the fire that would not die. With every breath, the lantern swelled. With every sigh, the glass rattled. They were not begging now. They were not cursing. They were urging me, commanding me, demanding I give in. I pressed my palms against my ears, but the sound was inside me, rattling my skull. My body ached with exhaustion, my eyes raw from sleepless nights. Every step felt heavier, as though the tower itself had wound chains around my ankles. The air stank of burning flesh, sharper now, choking, thick with the taste of ash that clung to my tongue. I stumbled back toward the stairs, but even in my chamber below, the light followed. It leaked beneath the door, poured through the shutters, filled every shadow with its glow. There was no darkness left, no rest, only the relentless blaze. I tried to bury myself beneath the damp blankets, but the fabric grew hot, smoldering as if set alight by my own breath. And that is when I understood. The lantern does not hunger for oil. It does not drink from wick or flame. It waits. It waits for me. It feeds on what I have left to give, the marrow of my bones, the fire of my soul. Every sleepless hour, every ragged breath, every beat of my heart weakens me. And when I finally collapse, when I finally surrender, it will claim me whole. The flame will not die with me. It will blaze stronger forever, fueled by my surrender. My soul will be trapped within its white fire, joining the chorus of drowned sailors, condemned to whisper and breathe and burn. My name, carved into its base, will be the warning left for the next poor soul who climbs these stairs. The next fool who thinks the light is only a beacon. Already I feel it tugging, pulling the strength from my veins, hollowing me out like a gutted fish. My reflection in the broken glass does not blink when I do. It smiles. Its mouth moves to words I do not yet understand. The lantern waits, and it will wait forever. And when I fall, when I finally give myself to it, the beam will cut through fog and storm, burning white and furious, not to guide ships, but to lure another keeper to his ruin. The cycle will never end, because the lantern does not die. It only feeds. And tonight, it will feed on me. The sea has a way of swallowing men whole. Out here, you can feel it breathing. Feel the swell of the water like the chest of some great creature just beneath the surface. The lighthouse sits alone, a spine of stone jutting from the waves, battered and blind. They told me the bell had not rung in 50 years. The salt had eaten it, hollow, rust locking its mouth shut. A relic of the old days, left to corrode in the wind. I believed them, until my first night. The supply men left before dusk, their boat a black smudge vanishing against the horizon. I was alone before the sun even touched the water. The tower groaned around me, each gust of wind pushing through the cracks like a sigh. I busied myself with unpacking provisions, lighting the lamp, convincing myself that solitude was a choice, not a sentence. But when the night thickened, when the waves began to hammer the stone with fists of black water, I heard it. A bell. It came low at first, a single strike, as if some unseen hand had tested its weight. Then again, louder. The sound rolled across the water, wet and metallic, as though the sea itself had swallowed the iron and was now spitting it back. It shivered through me, setting my teeth on edge until my jaw ached. I froze on the stairwell, every muscle rigid, listening to the sound that should not exist. The bell outside was a husk. I had seen it myself at sunset, hanging from its frame like a broken jawbone, rust eating through the once bright bronze. It was incapable of ringing. Yet there it was, tolling again and again. Each strike timed with the crash of the surf, as if the waves themselves were clanging the sound into life. I climbed to the lantern room, desperate to see. The wind whipped around the glass, and the beam of the lamp swept across a world of churning black water. Out there in the fog, the sound grew stranger. It was not the crisp ring of a bell, but a drowned sound, muffled and wet, carrying the drag of chains through the night air. My skin prickled. It was the sound of metal being struck from under the water, pulled from the depths instead of the frame above. I leaned out over the railing, staring down at the skeletal bell. It hung motionless, coated in crusted salt, a dead weight swaying slightly with the wind. But the sound grew louder, impossibly loud, echoing from the open sea. And then I felt it. The tower itself trembled, the stone vibrating under my hands. The bell was not ringing from above. It was ringing from below, its voice carried up through the water, through the rock, into the bones of the lighthouse. The waves battered harder, each strike against the foundation sinking with the toll. I gripped the railing so tightly the rust flaked into my palms. The sound clawed through me, pulling something loose inside my chest, something I did not want to name. I staggered back into the lantern room, the glass rattling with each toll. I could not escape it. The sound was in my teeth, in my skull, humming in the marrow of my bones. No door could shut it out. No wall could muffle it. It was not a sound carried on the wind. It was a summons, deep and relentless, rising from the sea's black throat. And as I pressed my hands over my ears, praying for silence, the bell tolled again, longer this time, stretching into a note that seemed almost to speak. A voice without words. A call meant only for me. The bell does not quiet. It never stills. It tolls slow and steady, a pulse that beats against the marrow of the tower and into my chest. I tell myself it must be the wind, the sea, anything but what it is. Yet when I lean out over the railing, the bell is motionless. The rusted mouth hangs open, cracked and lifeless, swaying gently in the salt wind. No sound comes from it, and still the tolling grows louder, closer, as if the ocean itself has found a voice. I grab the hand lamp and descend, boots slipping on damp stone. The sound follows, vibrating through the walls, pulling me toward the base of the tower. By the time I reach the door, the tolling has slowed into something like a heartbeat, low and deliberate. It is inside me now, throbbing in time with the blood in my veins. My hand trembles on the latch. When I step out into the night, the air hits me with the sharp tang of salt and iron. The sea is restless, black water climbing the rocks in frothing hands. I sweep the lamp across the surf, its thin light swallowed by the fog. At first, I see nothing but shifting waves, the endless churn of dark water. Then the beam catches something. Figures. They stand half submerged in the surf, bodies swaying with the rhythm of the tolling. Their movements are unnatural, too slow, too exact, as if they are pulled by invisible strings. Their mouths gape wide, black holes drinking in the night air, opening and closing in a chant I cannot hear. The sea churns around their waists, but they do not stumble. They do not fall. They only sway, perfectly in time with the heartbeat bell. My lamp shakes in my hand, the light darting across a pale faces. Their eyes catch the moonlight and flare white, bright as mirrors. The glow blinds me, forcing my gaze away. I blink hard, rub my eyes, and when I look again, they are gone. The surf is empty. Only water hisses against the rocks. But the bell does not stop. It tolls on, slow and patient, vibrating in my teeth. I stagger backward, nearly dropping the lamp. The shadows shift in the fog, tricking my eyes into shapes, but nothing stays long enough to prove real. My breath comes in quick, shallow bursts, as if the air itself has thinned. I tell myself I imagined them, some trick of exhaustion, the play of mist and moonlight. But deep in my chest, the toll beats harder, and I know they were there. I retreat inside, slamming the door, bracing my back against it as though the figures might follow. The sound bleeds through stone, through iron, through me. I climb the stairs, each toll dragging at my legs, urging me higher. When I reach the lantern room, the beam of the lamp sweeps out across the black water. But it no longer feels like my light. It feels borrowed. It feels like a lure. The bell tolls again, and in the corner of the glass, I see them. Not on the shore this time, but closer, floating just beyond the rocks. Their faces break the surface of the sea, mouths yawning wide, their eyes glowing like the reflection of stars. They sway with the tide, though no tide moves. Their chant is silent, yet I hear it deep inside, woven into the toll of the bell. I blink, and they vanish again. The water's empty. But the sound remains, patient and unyielding, slow as a heartbeat. A heartbeat not my own. The nights have become unbearable. The bell no longer tolls alone. It shakes the whole tower. The vibrations crawl through the walls like veins of thunder, rattling glass, clanging metal against stone, as if hundreds of hands are striking the iron at once. I wake to the bed quivering beneath me, the air thrumming with the weight of a sound too vast to be heard by ears alone. M'asseoir, teeth chatter against each other, though the night is warm. When I reach up to wipe sweat from my brow, my hand comes away wet, but not with sweat. Salt water drips from my hair, thick and briny, soaking my pillow. The sheets are damp, clinging to me with the stench of seaweed and rot. Yet the door is still locked, the shutters barred. I have not left my bed. Still, the ocean clings to me, creeping up from unseen cracks, seeping into my very skin. In the mornings, I find the evidence everywhere. My journal, left open on the desk, is warped and swollen. The pages wrinkled as if they were dipped in the tide. The ink I had written with the night before bleeds across the paper, twisting into shapes I do not recognize. Thin black veins spreading into words not my own. Sometimes I think I see names written there, familiar names, sailors I have heard whispered about in the village. Other times, it is nothing but spirals, the patterns of whirlpools dragging me down into the center of the page. The air is never dry anymore. My boots squelch on the wooden floorboards, slick with brine that vanishes by daylight. The lantern glass fogs with condensation, though no flame burns hot enough to cause it. My fingers prune as though I have been submerged too long. I cannot escape the damp, no matter how I try. When sleep does come, it is worse than the waking. I dream only of water. I dream of the sea closing over my head, my limbs thrashing, my lungs burning. I dream of hands, pale and clammy, sliding around my wrists and ankles, dragging me down through black water. They do not let go. I scream, but the sound dies in my throat, replaced by a rush of bubbles swallowed by the dark. Each night the dreams deepen. I no longer fight when they come. I sink, faster, harder, as if weighted by chains. The faces rise to meet me. Those same hollow-eyed figures from the surf, mouths yawning wide, eyes catching light that does not exist in the depths. They greet me in silence, but I feel their joy. They want me among them, and always, behind them, I hear it. The toll. The bell's voice muffled and distant, yet impossibly loud, vibrating through the water as though struck by 1,000 unseen hands. It calls with a rhythm I cannot resist, a heartbeat louder than my own. It pulls me deeper each time, until I wake gasping for air, brine burning in my throat as if I had swallowed the sea. I no longer know if the dreams end when my eyes open. The salt water still drips from my hair, the pages still warp with wetness. The ink still bleeds into veins that twist across the paper. The line between sleep and waking blurs, drowned in the endless toll. And through it all, the tower shakes, ceaseless, tireless, as if the dead themselves are beating their fists against the iron, demanding I open the door and let them in. The next night, the tolling never stops. It begins at dusk, when the sun sinks into the waves, and it does not falter. Strike after strike, relentless, until the sound gnaws into my skull like teeth. My head pounds with it, every pulse in my temple sinking to the slow, merciless rhythm. I press pillows against my ears, bury myself under the damp blankets, but the sound only grows louder. It is not outside me anymore. It is inside, vibrating against my bones, demanding my attention. By midnight, I can bear it no longer. I stumble from the bed, half mad with exhaustion, dragging myself up the spiral stair. My lantern flickers with each toll, its flame bending toward the sound, as if compelled. The tower quivers beneath my hands, every iron bolt trembling. The closer I climb, the sharper the pain in my skull, until each step feels like walking into a hammer blow. At last, I reach the platform where the bell hangs. The night is still, the air thick with salt and fog. The bell looms above me, its bronze skin corroded into streaks of green, pitted with rust. It sways only slightly in the wind, lifeless, just as I had seen it before. Yet the tolling continues, louder now, rattling the railing beneath my hands. My vision blurs, my teeth ache as if cracking in my jaw. Driven by some desperate fury, I step forward and grab the edge of the bell. My palms burn on the cold, wet metal. The instant I touch it, the sound stops. Silence crashes down, heavy and absolute, and for a moment, I think I've won. Relief swells through me. The tolling is gone. Then the screaming begins. It floods the air so suddenly I stagger back. Not one scream, but hundreds. The voices of men, of boys, tearing out of the bell in a tidal wave of agony. They howl in terror, in rage, in grief so raw it carves into me. I clutch my head, but the sound does not enter through my ears. It pierces through the metal, through the stone, pouring directly into me. I hear them dying, the scrape of rigging snapping in storms, the crash of hulls breaking against rocks, the rush of water filling their lungs, cutting their cries into choking gurgles. Each scream latches onto me, sinking into my chest, filling me with their panic. My knees give way, and I collapse onto the slick platform. The bell above vibrates violently, shuddering with their pain, its green surface glowing faintly with every cry. Through the cacophony, words begin to form. Not screams now, but accusations, layered in countless tongues. Yet I understand them all. They tell me they were never saved, that the light was dark, the bell unkept, when they needed it most, that no one came, and so they drowned in the black sea while the tower stood silent. Their grief turns to fury. They curse me as if I had been here all those years, as if I had abandoned them to the waves. I try to shout back, to tell them it was not me, that I am only one man alone. But my voice is lost in theirs, swallowed by their hatred. The words splinter against my skull like glass. The screams swell to a pitch beyond human, beyond earthly. My body shakes with it, my skin crawling with cold. The bell thrums against my hands, like a living heart. The voices pour into me until I am no longer sure which are theirs and which are mine. I clutch my ears, my eyes, but nothing helps. Their rage is inside me, and I cannot drive it out. And then I hear it. One voice above the rest, clear, deliberate. It speaks my name. The bell tolls again. And I know they will never stop until I join them. When morning comes, the silence I prayed for never arrives. The bell tolls on, slower at first, then quickening with a rhythm that makes my ribs ache as though something beats from inside my chest. I stagger from my bed, hair matted with salt water, and open the door to the stairwell. My stomach turns. Seaweed slick and black trails upward along the steps, dripping brine as though the ocean itself has climbed inside. The smell is unbearable. Rot, fish guts, the reek of drowned flesh. Each strand glistens, writhing faintly like veins still pulsing with blood. I follow the trail with weak, reluctant steps, the tower groaning as if it too dreads what waits above. The higher I climb, the louder the toll becomes. no longer muffled but sharp and ringing, echoing off the stone until the whole lighthouse seems to swing with it. My hands cling to the railing, slick with moisture, my breath clouding in the salt, thick air. At the top, the bell moves. I see it with my own eyes. Rusted and heavy though it is, the bronze giant swings wildly now, far beyond what the weak wind could command. It arcs back and forth, each strike thunderous, shaking the platform beneath my boots. Droplets spray from its surface, flinging salt water into the air. It is alive, straining its corroded frame, summoning something from the depths below. I lean out over the railing, and the sea answers. The water churns unnaturally, not with tide or storm, but with purpose. Great dark shapes move beneath the surface, circling, rising. The bell tolls again, and the figures break water. Faces pale and swollen, eyes clouded, mouths open in a soundless chorus. The drowned sailors, the very same who screamed through the night. They reach upward with hands shredded by coral, dragging chains that glint wet in the morning sun. Their mouths open wider, each toe bending their movements until their bodies sway with the rhythm. And though the wind steals their voices, I hear them in my head as clear as if they stood at my ear. They are calling me, not pleading this time, not bargaining, but demanding. I back away, but the seaweed coils tighter around the stairs, slick tendrils creeping higher, reaching for my legs. The bell swings faster now, its cry frenzied, desperate, as though the very ocean needs me. My chest heaves, my heart hammering to match the rhythm. I understand too late. The bell does not toll for the dead. It tolls for the living. For me. The figures in the sea lift their arms in unison, chains rattling, eyes gleaming like mirrors. The waves roar as they surge toward the tower, their movements no longer sluggish, but sharp, certain. The sea itself rises with them, crashing against the stone, spraying salt water through the cracks in the walls. The lighthouse shudders as if it will topple, dragged down into the deep along with me. I press my back against the lantern glass, but the sound is everywhere now, rattling in my teeth, humming in my blood. The bell calls, and the sea obeys. My strength falters. I know what waits. The drowned will not rest until I join them, until my voice is bound to the toll, ringing forever in the black water. The seaweed curls around my ankles. The stairs are slick, the tower sways, and as the bell swings harder, faster, its sound splitting the morning air, I feel myself pulled toward the sea, toward their open mouths, toward the silence that waits in the deep. The ocean does not forget, and now it has come for me. They sent me here with little warning, just a letter stamped with the seal of the Coast Guard and a promise of pay that would be waiting when the month was through. The last keeper, they said, had abandoned his post, left without a word, without a trace. The boatmen who ferried me out whispered otherwise, though their voices were low, as if the sea itself was listening. They spoke of a man gone wrong in the head, who raved about footsteps that never stopped climbing, and doors that slammed themselves through the air was calm. Madness, they called it. Solitude breeds strange fancies. I laughed and told myself I was made of sterner stuff. The lighthouse rose out of the mist like something dredged from the belly of the ocean, tall and black, its skin glistening with wet stone. From the boat, it had looked like a sentinel. Up close, it was more a tomb, slick with salt and algae, the iron railing rusted through like the bones of some long-dead beast. As I stepped onto the dock, the smell of rot clung in my throat, though I saw no dead fish, no seaweed piled by the tide. Only that smell, like something had crawled inside the stones and died there. Inside, the air was colder. as though the walls themselves leached the warmth from my skin. The quarters were small but familiar enough. Cot, table, stove, the bare tools of a life at sea. On the desk sat a leather-bound logbook, warped with damp, its cover slick to the touch. I opened it by lantern light, the pages curling beneath my fingers, ink blurred by moisture. The first entries were ordinary. Weather reports, lamp oil tallies, ships sighted far on the horizon. But as the days passed in the keeper's hand, the tone shifted. He wrote of footsteps echoing up the spiral stairs, though he climbed them alone. He wrote of doors that slammed shut behind him, though there was no draft. He wrote of shadows caught in the corner of his eye that dissolved when he turned his head. His handwriting grew jagged, frantic, words scratched deep as if he carved them with shaking hands. The final entry trailed into a smear of ink, the words half-formed. "It waits at the top." Closed the book and told myself he had lost his mind. Isolation does that. Too many weeks with nothing but the gulls and the crash of waves. The human ear begins to hear what is not there. The human eye sees movement where there is only fog. I told myself that I was not like him, that I was stronger. But even as I said it, the tower loomed above me. The spiral stair twisted into blackness, the lantern room hidden in the mist like a blind eye staring down. My own reflection in the window glass seemed faint, thin, as though I were already fading into the stone. I shook the thought away. That first night I lay in the cot, listening to the sea batter the rocks. Every groan of the tower, I told myself, was only the wind. Every creak of the floorboards I blamed on age. But sleep would not come. My eyes kept sliding to the ceiling, to the stairs just beyond my door, waiting for something I refused to name. And when I finally drifted, just as dawn was beginning to bleed through the shutters, I dreamed of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, climbing higher and higher, though the stair was empty. I woke with my heart hammering, convinced someone had been standing just outside my door. The logbook lay open on the desk, though I had shut it. The final words of the vanished keeper glistened in the dim light, the ink darker now, fresher somehow, as though they had just been written. It waits at the top. The second night was worse. The sea rose high, waves pounding the stone like fists, rattling the window panes until I thought they might shatter. I lit the lantern early, its beam stretching thin and pale across the fog, a lonely eye staring into nothing. I tried to distract myself with the logbook, scratching neat lines about wind speed and visibility, forcing my hand to stay steady. But the words blurred, my mind returning again and again to the last keeper's frantic scrawl. It waits at the top. By midnight, the storm had calmed, leaving the tower in a hush that felt wrong, as though the world had gone suddenly deaf. I set the pen down and listened. For a while, there was only the steady groan of stones settling against the tide. Then I heard it. Boots on the stairs. They were slow, deliberate, each step echoing through the hollow spine of the tower. Not the skittering of rats, not the shifting of timber, but the heavy, rhythmic tread of a man climbing upward. I froze, every muscle locked. No one else was assigned here. The supply boat would not return for weeks. Yet the steps came on, closer, rising from the bottom floor. I backed into the watchroom, shutting the door and sliding the bolt across. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud enough I thought it would give me away. Still, the footsteps climbed, dragging their echoes up the spiral stair, until they stopped. Right outside my door. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I stood there in the dark, my hand pressed to the wood, waiting for the knock that never came. The air grew colder. A sharp, wet chill that seeped under the door raised goose flesh on my skin. my breath fogged in front of me. I gripped the lantern tighter, the flame quivering as though it too was afraid. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. My legs ached, my back stiff, but I did not move. Finally, with my nerves frayed to threads, I slid the bolt back. The hinges groaned as I opened the door a crack. Nothing. Only the spiral stair winding upward, swallowed in shadow. I stepped out, the boards cold under my bare feet. The air was heavy with salt, sharp and metallic. I raised the lantern, its light crawling over the stones, and that was when I saw them. Prints. Not boot prints, not the neat tread of a leather sole, but bare feet, pressed wet into the dust. Each one darkened the floor as though water still clung to them, fresh and glistening. They led from the bottom of the stair, up past my door, and continued higher, fading into the darkness toward the lantern room. My stomach knotted. The storm had locked the island in a wall of water. No boat could have come. No man could have entered. And yet the prints were there, undeniable, as though someone had walked straight out of the sea and into the tower. The lantern in my hand flickered hard, almost dying. And in that brief dimming, I thought I saw a shadow move at the bend of the stair above. Not fast, not sudden. Just the slow tilt of a figure leaning forward, watching me. But when the flame steadied, there was nothing but stone and shadow. The prints were still wet, fresh, waiting. I retreated into the watchroom, bolting the door once more. But all night I could feel it. The presence outside, patient and still, as though it had no need of sleep, as though it was waiting for me to climb higher. By the third evening, the silence in the tower has changed. It is no longer the hush of stone and sea, but something alive, something holding its breath and waiting. Each time I climb the stair, the hairs at the back of my neck rise, prickling as though eyes follow me up every step. I glance over my shoulder, certain I will see a figure in the shadows. But there is never anything there. Only the weight of being watched, heavier with each passing night. The lantern glass betrays me. At first it was subtle. My reflection seemed blurred, warped by the curve of the lens. But then it began to linger. I would turn my head and catch it still facing forward, a fraction too slow to follow. One night I smiled faintly at my own foolishness, only to see it grin wide, lips peeling back to show teeth I had not bared. The image melted back into me a second later, leaving me trembling in the cold light. The rot spreads through everything I touch. Bread that was fresh in the morning turns black by nightfall, a bloom of mold racing across the crust. Apples collapse in on themselves, soft and sour. Even the water stinks of brine after only a few hours in the jug. My matches too betray me. I strike them and watch the heads flare bright, only to hiss and die before flame can catch. I am left with the bitter stink of sulfur, smoke curling into my face like mockery. It is as though the tower conspires to strip away every comfort, every tool, until I am left with nothing but the light. The logbook is the worst. I try to keep steady notes, recording the days as I was ordered. But the book will not obey me. Each time I open it, there are entries I do not remember writing. Neat rows of words in my own hand, ink as fresh as if the pen had only just left the page. Yet the words describe things that have not yet happened. He hears the boots again, slower this time. He sees the shadow move in the lantern glass. He does not sleep. I slam the book shut, but when I open it again, there are more. Entire nights laid out in detail, moments I dread before they come. I try to ignore them, but when the time comes, each one unfolds exactly as written. The footsteps, the shadow, the sleepless hours. My life has been stolen and transcribed before I live it, the ink guiding me like a leash I cannot cut. Tonight, I flipped to the latest entry and found a page I could not bring myself to read fully. The words blurred, my eyes refusing to linger. All I caught was the beginning. He climbs the stair, though he swore he never would. He reaches the top. He does not return. I slammed the book shut so hard the spine cracked, but the words had already carved themselves into me. They wait in the corners of my mind, a prophecy written in my own hand. And now, as I sit in the watchroom, lantern burning too bright, I catch my reflection again in the window. It smiles, though I do not. Its hand moves across a page I cannot see. It writes. And I know tomorrow, when I open the logbook, the words will already be there, waiting for me. By the fourth night, the tower breathes rot. It thickens in the air, crawling down my throat until every breath tastes of spoiled meat and damp soil. The smell seeps from the walls, from the stairs, from the cracks in the stone, as though the lighthouse itself is rotting alive. I cannot eat. I cannot drink. Even the water tastes foul, brackish and bitter, as if dredged straight from a grave in the sea. I keep to the watchroom, lantern close, though the flame offers no comfort now. Every time I glance at the stairwell, I see them. Shadows crouched along the steps, hunched figures with limbs folded wrong, waiting with inhuman patience. They shift when I blink, inching closer, their outlines blurring into the dark stone. Yet I feel their eyes on me. They never climb, never descend. They only wait. The tower grows colder by the hour. My breath fogs even as sweat beads on my skin. I know I should not climb higher, should not give them the satisfaction, yet the pull is stronger each night. It drags me upward, step by step, until I find myself again before the lantern. And there, the reflection no longer hides. It greets me as I enter, standing tall in the glass. My reflection should match me, should mirror my fear, my clenched jaw, my trembling hands. But it does not. Its eyes glitter with hunger, its lips curling into a smile that stretches too wide. When I scowl, it grins. When I turn away, it leans forward, pressing its face against the lens as though straining to break free. Tonight it mouths words. Its lips shape syllables, silent at first, then louder, until I hear them whispered inside my head. Trade. The word echoes, sharper with each repetition, until my skull hums with it. Trade, trade, trade. I stumble back, shaking my head, but its mouth widens, teeth flashing in the sickly light. It presses its hands against the glass, palms flat, fingers splayed. Mine twitch in answer, compelled to lift and mirror it. For a breathless moment, I nearly do. Behind it, the flame has changed. No longer white, no longer the ordinary burn of oil and wick. It glows green now, a sick phosphorescence that pulses slow and steady. Like a heartbeat, each throb fills the room, rattling the glass, pushing the shadows on the stairs closer. The green light paints my reflection in unnatural hues, turning its grin into a cavern, its eyes into pits. The stench grows stronger, unbearable. I gag, pressing my sleeve to my face, but the rot clings. My reflection laughs without sound, its body shuddering with glee. I know then that it is not me, not merely a trick of glass. It is something else, something that has worn the shape of every keeper before me, and now waits for me to give in. The green light swells, blinding, and the words pound in my skull, louder than the sea, louder than my own heartbeat. Trade places. And as I stumble back down the stairs, shadows shifting in the corners of my vision, I know it is only a matter of time before I do. I should have left long ago. I told myself I would endure until the supply boat returned, that the madness of the tower was nothing more than loneliness eating at me. But the days have bled into nights, and the nights have bled into something worse, until I no longer know where I stand. The shadows climb higher, the rot stains every breath, and the logbook waits on the desk like a trap I cannot resist. Tonight I opened it again. I told myself I would not, that I would burn it if I had to. But the pages call to me, whispering like the sea through cracks in the stone. The ink shines wet on the paper I did not touch, each stroke in my hand, though I never set the pen to it. My eyes blur, my stomach twists, but I cannot look away. The final entry is there, waiting. It does not predict, it declares. The words are carved into the page as though branded. He took the watch at midnight. He never came down. My breath catches in my throat. The room tilts, the stair groaning with weight, though I stand still. The lantern flares above, its green pulse spilling down the spiral, coating the walls like veins of poison. I tell myself to run, to bar the door, to flee into the night and take my chances with the sea. But my feet move upward instead, one step, then another, carrying me toward the flame that waits at the top. The shadows shrink back as I climb, as though they know what comes next. The smell of rot is unbearable, clinging to my tongue like ash. The lantern room yawns open before me, light pouring across the floor in waves that do not flicker like fire, but beat like a heart. And in the glass, my reflection is waiting. It does not mimic me now. It stands tall and eager, its grin stretching wide enough to split its face. When I raise my hand, it does not follow. It presses its palm flat against the glass, beckoning. I step closer, the logbook's final words still burning behind my eyes. The glass trembles, the green light throbbing, and then its hand pushes through. Cold fingers close around my wrist. My scream dies in my throat as it yanks, and the surface of the glass ripples like water. My body is dragged forward, my skin pulled through, my bones folding, breaking, until I am inside, staring back at the world through the warped lens. The reflection wears my body now, blinking in my eyes, breathing with my lungs. It smiles at me once more, then turns to tend the flame. The lantern burns brighter, fed by something deeper than oil, brighter than any fire of man. I pound against the glass, but no sound escapes. My words vanish into the hum of the flame. And as the night fades, the logbook below closes with a soft thud, its spine bending as though an unseen hand has finished its task. By dawn, everything is silent again. The tower waits, patient. My words are written, waiting for the next keeper to read them. They will think me mad, as I thought of the one before me. And then they will climb and see the lantern, and find themselves staring into eyes that grin when they do not. The logbook will open again. Another entry will write itself. Another name will be claimed, because no keeper ever truly leaves this place. And I know now, with a certainty that crushes me, that I never came down. Monk the Island is little more than a scar in the ocean, a black tooth jutting up through endless swells. When the supply boat left me here, its men avoided my eyes, hands quick on the oars, eager to be gone before the tide turned. They told me little, only that no one stayed here long. The reefs are too cruel, the storms too sudden, the silence too deep. I shrugged it off. A month alone seemed a fair price for good pay. The first week passes without incident. The days are quiet, the lamp steady, the sea unbroken, but for the occasional gull circling overhead. I spend my hours tending to the lantern, writing in the log, pacing the worn floorboards. The silence grows heavy at times, pressing against me like an unseen weight. But I tell myself I will grow used to it. The solitude becomes a routine. Then the tide changes. It begins with a glimmer on the rocks below, a pale shine in the moonlight. I climb down the jagged path, boots scraping on stone, and find it waiting for me. A bone, sun-bleached and brittle, nestled in a bed of seaweed. At first, I think it a stray remnant, the skeleton of a fish or bird washed ashore. But it is too large, too human. I find more the next day, scattered along the shore, half buried in sand, wedged between the teeth of the reef. Not whole skeletons, but fragments, ribs, femurs, a skull cracked clean through. They are not left in chaos, not thrown by the tide. They are arranged, placed with care into shapes and symbols, stars broken apart and laid against the stone. The gulls do not touch them. They circle overhead, wings glinting silver, but none descend. No scavenger claims the flesh that once clung to these bones. Even the crabs scuttle wide, giving the patterns a wide berth as though afraid. I kneel beside them, my breath misting in the cold air, and a chill runs through me that no wind can cause. These are not relics of shipwreck alone. The sea takes, yes, but it does not arrange. Something else has done this, something that waits for the tide, that moves in silence when no one is there to see. That night, back inside the tower, I cannot shake the image from my mind. Bones scattered like broken constellations, as if the dead themselves had crawled ashore to map out some design. I lie awake listening to the sea batter the rocks, hearing in every crash not water but whispers, as though the island itself speaks through the tide. In the morning, I descend again, hoping to find the patterns disturbed, scattered by waves or wind. Instead, there are more. A new set of bones, smaller, sharper, laid into a spiral that tightens into a dark pool of water at its center. The sea has not grown calm, the sky has not cleared, and yet the island has given up more remains. The gulls still circle, but none dare land. I walk back to the tower with the sun at my back and the tide rising once more. I tell myself I will stay inside tonight, that I will bolt the door and ignore whatever waits below. But I already know I will be drawn down again, compelled to see what new pattern the sea has chosen to reveal. Because the island is not barren. It is hungry, and it is showing me how it feeds. By the second week, the patterns no longer stay. Each night, the tide comes, and the bones are rearranged, only for me to find them changed again by morning. But one night, when the fog presses close and the lantern's beam sweeps heavy across the surf, I see something different. The bones are gone, not scattered by waves or claimed by gulls, simply gone, as if they had never been there at all. At first, I feel relief. The strange constellations had gnawed at my thoughts, keeping me from sleep, convincing me the island itself meant to speak in some language of the dead. But the relief does not last. For when I stare down into the circle of sand below the tower, I see movement. Shapes dragging themselves just beyond the reach of the lantern's light. They are not gulls, not seals, not men. Their bodies are slick and pale, glistening under the moonlight as though oiled in brine. They move slowly, dragging themselves across the sand with limbs too long, leaving trails that steam against the cold air. The mist parts around them, curling upward like smoke, so that each one seems to carry its own fog as it crawls. I freeze at the glass, breath clouding, watching as the shapes gather where the bones had once been. My heart stutters, desperate to believe they are illusions, tricks of light bent through the fog. But then I hear them. Low at first, a vibration beneath the crash of waves, then rising into something unmistakable. A chant. The words are thick and guttural, too heavy for human tongues. They roll across the water like thunder, curling the air inside the tower. The sound makes my skin prickle, the hairs on my arms standing straight. I do not understand the words, yet they pierce me all the same, setting my teeth on edge, hollowing my chest with dread. It is a language that does not belong to air or stone. It belongs to the depths. The shapes sway as they crawl, their bodies bowing and rising with the rhythm of the chant. Trails of brine sizzle against the sand, glowing faintly in the moonlight like veins of fire beneath their skin. When the wind shifts, the stench rises, salt, rot, and something fouler still, as though the very marrow of the bones I had seen has been boiled into the air. I try to turn from the window, but the sound holds me. The chant pulls at me, thick and suffocating, urging me to listen, to join. My hand presses against the glass, unbidden, as though I might reach down to them. The figures writhe in answer, their heads tilting upward, though I cannot see faces. Only pale, slick flesh, gleaming wet, and mouths that do not close. The lantern's beam sweeps across them at last, and in its glow they shrink back, curling into themselves, dragging faster across the sand. The chant falters, dropping to a hiss. They scuttle to the edges of the rocks, retreating just out of reach of the light. Yet even there, half hidden, I see them moving, circling, waiting for the moment the lantern fails. The chant does not stop. It only lowers, vibrating beneath the crash of the waves, crawling through the stone walls, into my ears, my chest, my skull. It seeps into me, curdling my blood, a rhythm that will not leave even when silence returns. I stumble from the window, clutching my ears, but the words are already inside. They whisper with the voice of the tide, a promise, a threat. I know then that the bones were not scattered by chance. They were offerings, arrangements for something that comes when the lantern burns low. And now it has noticed me. The night after I first saw them, I swore I would not step outside again. I bolted the door, shuttered the windows, and told myself I would endure until the supply boat returned. But the island has its own way of creeping in. It does not need doors. It does not need windows. The first drip came from the ceiling, striking my cheek as I sat at the desk. I brushed it away, certain it was condensation from the damp air. Then came another, and another, until droplets pattered on the journal pages, smearing the ink into dark rivulets. When I touched the wall, water seeped through the stone itself, briny and cold, running down my fingers as if the sea had forced its way inside. The floor darkened with spreading patches, and soon my boots squelched with every step. I tried to light the stove for warmth, but the matches hissed useless in the wet air, smoke curling into my eyes. The stench of salt and decay grew stronger as the water thickened into shallow pools, lapping against the legs of the furniture. I staggered back as a fish, silver and thrashing, flopped out of the corner as though spat from the wall itself. Its gills wheezed, its body convulsed. Before it stilled, eyes glazed white. Another followed, then another. Soon the corners writhed with life that did not belong here, creatures coughing themselves into existence from the stone. I climbed the stairs, the water slapping against my ankles, cold enough to numb the skin. But the tide followed, rising step by step, whispering against the stone as it climbed. I heard it as more than water, the rush of syllables, low and wet, curling around my ears. Words I could not understand, yet they slithered into me all the same. They promised nothing I wanted, only that there was no escape. I pushed higher, breath ragged, the tower groaning as though it bore some great weight. The spiral narrowed, slick with seawater, forcing me upward into the lantern room. I slammed the hatch behind me, gasping. But the sound of water followed, the whispering rush coiling beneath the door. The glass walls around me fogged with condensation, droplets streaking down like tears. And then I heard it, breathing. Not mine, not the strained wheeze of my chest, not the quick, shallow gasps I dragged through clenched teeth. This was deeper, slower, wet. It filled the lantern room, rasping in and out, as if lungs larger than mine exhaled brine into the air. Each breath rattled against the glass, fogging it further, until shapes began to smear across the panes. I spun, lantern trembling in my hand, but the room was empty. Only the beam cut through the fog, sweeping across the sea below. Yet the breathing did not falter. It circled me, pressing close, damp against my ear, so near I felt the spray on my neck. My own breath came faster, ragged, until I could no longer tell which belonged to me and which belonged to it. The flame inside the great lamp flickered green, pulsing once, twice, like a heartbeat. The breath swelled with it, filling the chamber, pressing me back against the iron frame. My reflection in the glass blurred, warped, as though someone else stood behind the pane, their chest rising and falling with each echoing breath. I clutched the railing, refusing to look too long. Because deep down I knew, whatever shared the air with me was not outside. It was inside the tower, and it had learned to breathe. The night I finally saw them, the fog was thinner, the sea strangely calm, as though the island itself had drawn in its breath. I stood in the lantern room, the great lamp's beam sweeping slow arcs across the black water, and for the first time, the crawling shadows did not scatter. They remained where they were, gathered at the base of the tower, shapes rising from the surf like pale roots breaking through soil. They were long-limbed, impossibly so, their arms hanging down to drag against the rock. Their torsos were thin, ribs jutting through slick skin, glistening as if wrapped in strands of kelp. They had no faces, only smooth plains where mouths and eyes should have been. Yet somehow I knew they were watching me. As the light swept across them, they did not recoil. Instead, they bowed. One after another, dozens of them bending low, their limbs folding in grotesque worship. Their bodies pressed against the reef, chests heaving with sounds too deep to be heard, but felt in my bones. They bent toward the light, as though it were their altar, their god. For a moment I stood frozen, my mind clawing at any explanation. Were they bound to the flame? Servants to its glow? Had the light kept me safe all along, when I thought it only made me visible? The thought almost soothed me, until I tested it. Curiosity, or perhaps madness, made me reach for the wick. My fingers trembled as I lowered the flame, dimming its brilliance until the beam shrank, weak and faltering. And the worship ended. They shrieked. The sound tore through the air, a chorus of rage that rattled the glass, made my teeth chatter against each other. Their bowed bodies snapped upright, arms clawing at the air. They surged forward, striking the stone of the tower with nails that screeched against the rock. The sound was unbearable, a grinding howl that shook the very bones of the island. I watched in horror as their claws carved grooves deep into the stone, as though the tower itself were soft clay. The walls shuddered with each strike. The spiral stair beneath me groaned as dust rained down from the ceiling. The island did not resist them. It yielded, as if the creatures in the stone were one and the same, as if the very ground wanted me torn apart. I fumbled at the controls, my hands slick with sweat, raising the flame again in desperation. The light flared, bursting across the reef, and the creatures froze, their shrieks cut off mid-breath. Slowly, as one, they bowed again, their long limbs trembling as if straining against some tether. My chest heaved, lungs raw, heart pounding with the rhythm of their guttural silence. I dared not move, dared not dim the light again. My only weapon was the flame, and I had seen what happened without it. The grooves in the stone remain, deep scars carved by faceless worshippers, proof that they are not illusion, not madness, alone. They wait below, patient and unblinking, bound to the light, but ready to tear the tower down if ever it fails. And as I press my trembling palm against the lantern glass, I feel a pulse deep within it, steady and alive, as though the flame itself knows it has become more than fire. It is a bargain, it is a leash, and I am the one forced to hold it. By dawn, the island pretends at peace. The tide withdraws in a long hiss, dragging foam back across the reefs, leaving the black stone bare. I lean against the lantern glass, too weary to stand, and watch as the water recedes. The creatures are gone. No pale limbs, no bowed ribs, no shrieking claws. Only empty rock glistening in the thin morning light. For a moment, I could almost believe it, a dream. Some delirium conjured from hunger and solitude. But when I descend the stairs and step onto the sand, I see what the sea has left behind. The bones are gone again. Not a fragment remains of the patterns I saw, not a skull or a rib. The gulls circle overhead, silent, never landing. The rocks look scrubbed clean, yet the sand is not smooth. It is pocked with holes, hundreds of them, each no wider than a fist, burrows drilled deep into the shore. The sand around them is damp, darker than the rest, as though something slick has crawled into hiding. I crouch, peering at the nearest, and a briny stench rises to meet me, wet and foul, thick enough to turn my stomach. The hole drops into darkness, deeper than the eye can follow, as if it leads straight down into the throat of the earth. And then it strikes me. The creatures did not retreat into the sea. They burrowed down. They folded themselves into the island's body, vanishing like worms back into soil. The island is not barren stone. It is hollow, a hive, a lung, and I have been living in its chest, waiting for it to breathe me in. The realization sickens me. The grooves clawed into the tower stone were not just fury. They were hunger. Each tide brings them back, closer, hungrier, bowing when the light burns, shrieking when it dims, gnawing at the shell of rock that shelters me. The island is alive, and like any living thing, it feeds. I stumble back from the burrows, the sand shifting beneath my boots. For a moment, I swear I hear it, the faintest whisper rising from below. The guttural chant carried on air damp and hot, as though the island exhales through the holes in its flesh. I staggered toward the tower, pulse hammering in my ears, fighting the urge to collapse. Inside, the smell of rot clings thicker than before. The walls are wet to the touch, stone seeping with brine. The fish that once writhed in the corners are gone, leaving behind slick stains that shimmer in the dim light. My journal lies open on the desk, pages curling, though I have not touched it. The ink bleeds in twisting lines, forming shapes like the broken stars I first saw drawn in bone. I do not write these words. The island does. My hand twitches, drawn toward the pen, but I Resist? Not yet. By the time the sun is high, the burrows will dry, collapsing into the sand as though they never were. The rocks will bleach under the light, bare and innocent. But I will know. I will hear them still, curled beneath the earth, waiting for the tide to rise again. I understand now. The bones were not remnants of wrecks, not offerings left by chance. They were proof of those swallowed whole. Sailors, keepers, wanderers. The island takes them all, tide by tide, until nothing remains but patterns drawn in bone. And I am next. The island does not hurry. It has fed for centuries, patient as the tide, patient as stone. It will wait for the moment the light falters, for the night when my hands tremble and the flame dims. Then it will rise, burrow by burrow, claw by claw, until it swallows me whole. And when the tide withdraws again, there will be no trace of me at all. The sea was restless the night they left me. Waves broke hard against the stone jetty, and the wind tore at my coat, as though urging me back to the boat. The men who ferried me across the channel did not linger. When I mentioned the name I had read in the records, the name of the keeper's wife who had once lived here, they crossed themselves, their mouths tight, eyes avoiding mine. They warned me nothing, said nothing, only pushed away from the dock as if my presence already cursed them. The lighthouse loomed behind me, its narrow frame black against the bruised sky. It was older than most. Stonework weathered into pits and scars, iron railing rusted through, glass panes fogged with the sea's eternal breath. I told myself the tales of her death were little more than village superstition. She had slipped, perhaps, or grown sick in isolation. The stories had twisted her into something else, as the years always do. The first days passed in routine. I kept the logs, trimmed the wick, polished the glass. The sea raged and calmed again, as it always does. Loneliness was heavy, but I had braved solitude before. At night, I read by lamplight, listening to the wind scrape its long fingers across the tower. It was on the first night that I heard it. A sound, faint and low, carried not from outside but within the very walls. A melody slow and mournful, the shape of a lullaby I could not quite place. The notes were thin, no louder than breath, yet they threaded through the stones as if the tower itself hummed. At first I laughed, shaking my head. The wind, I told myself, the wind bending around the cracks, finding its own strange voice. Yet the longer I listened, the less it sounded like accident. The tune repeated, hesitant but clear, a cradle song worn thin with sorrow. I sat up in my bed, every hair prickling. The air in the room was cold, though the stove still glowed with embers. The melody wound through the darkness, circling me, sinking into my skin. My chest tightened with something I did not want to name. Fear, yes, but sorrow too, as if the sound carried grief old and heavy enough to seep into marrow. I pressed my hand to the wall, and the stone thrummed faintly, vibrating beneath my palm. The song bled through it, not around it. Not from wind, not from sea, from within. I lay awake until dawn, the tune lingering long after it ceased. And in the pale light of morning, I told myself I had imagined it. Loneliness plays cruel tricks. The mind clutches at phantom company when none exists. But when I opened the logbook to record the weather, I found a line I had not written. One sentence, ink still fresh, in a hand not mine. She sings because she waits. I dropped the pen, my stomach churning, staring at the words until the page blurred with tears I had not felt forming. The villagers had been right to cross themselves. Her name was no superstition. The keeper's widow was here still, humming through the stone, waiting for someone to hear. And I had heard her. The next night, I could not resist the sound. It came again, soft and unbroken, threading up through the stones like veins of sorrow. The lullaby carried no comfort, only the ache of a grief that had never healed. I sat on the edge of my cot, listening until my skin prickled and the breath caught in my throat. Then, lantern in hand, I rose and followed it. The spiral stair stretched upward into shadow, each step groaning beneath me as though the tower resented my climb. The air grew colder the higher I went, wet and heavy, until every breath was like drawing brine into my chest. The song grew clearer, no longer muffled by walls. It echoed down the stairwell, each note trembling against the stone. At the top, I reached the lantern room. The glass panes streaked with salt, the great lamp unlit for the night. The lullaby swelled here, filling the chamber like mist. And when I turned, I saw her. She stood by the glass, the night pressing close behind her, a figure drenched as though she had just crawled from the sea. Her nightgown clung to her frame, sodden and dripping, leaving trails of water across the stone. Her hair hung in long black ropes, plastered to her shoulders, swaying with each movement of her head. In her arms, she held a bundle, wrapped tight in cloth darker than the night. She rocked it gently, her arms trembling with each sway, the lullaby rising and falling with the motion. But it was not her face that froze me. It was what was left of it. Her eyes were gone. Hollow sockets stared toward me, twin wounds weeping steady streams of seawater. The brine coursed down her cheeks, dripping into her mouth, spilling onto the bundle. Each drop hissed faintly when it struck the stone floor, as though too salt-thick to belong in this world. I stood rooted, unable to move, unable to speak. Her song faltered then, catching on a sob that twisted the air like a knife. She turned her head slowly, and though her eyes were nothing but void, I knew she saw me. The bundle stirred in her arms. For a fleeting moment, I thought it was a child. The cloth shifted, bulged, something writhing beneath it. She rocked it harder, the lullaby resuming, though cracked and broken with grief. My chest tightened with dread, my heart screaming at me to look away. But the sound that rose from the bundle held me fast. It was not the cry of an infant. It was low and wet, a gurgling keen that rattled the glass panes. The sound of lungs filling with water, of someone drowning again and again. The bundle jerked as though alive, convulsing, thrashing against her hold. She clutched it tighter, crooning words I could not understand, her sockets spilling endless brine. The lullaby swelled until it drowned out the wind, until it rattled the lantern itself. The bundle wailed, the sound so thick it pressed against my ribs, squeezing the air from my lungs. My lantern flame sputtered, nearly extinguished, and in the green-tinged dark of that moment, she stepped closer. Her nightgown trailed behind her like a tide, her arms extended as though offering the bundle to me. And the sound within it grew louder, closer, filling my ears with drowning breath. I stumbled backward against the stairwell, nearly tumbling down. My lantern flared again, casting her in light, and for a moment I saw her clearly. The hollows of her face, the sodden cloth, the thing writhing in her arms. She whispered then, her voice lower than the sea, rasping through her ruined throat. "Take him." The lullaby broke. The bundle shuddered, screaming with a sound no human child could ever make. And I fled, the stair spiraling below me, her weeping chasing me down into the dark. I have barred every door, wedged the stairwell shut, and yet she finds her way inside. No lock, no wall, No prayer keeps her from me. Each night the song begins, soft as breath, winding through the cracks like mist. At first, it is the same mournful lullaby, fragile and low, but before long it changes. The sweetness rots away, the notes splitting, warping, curdling into screams. They echo down the stairwell, rattling the iron rails, reverberating in my skull until I feel my bones will shatter with the sound. I clutch the lantern as if its light will save me, but the flame no longer obeys. I fill the reservoir to the brim, trim the wick with steady hands, yet still it sputters and spits as if drowning. Shadows lengthen in the corners, wet and dripping, moving when I cannot. The glow falters just as the song shifts, as though the two are bound. The darker the room, the louder her voice. Salt has begun to bloom around me, crusting the edges of my cot, glittering across the floorboards in sharp white veins. I wake to find my blanket stiff with it, my pillow crusted, my mouth filled with the taste of the sea. My skin burns with rashes, raw where the crystals form against me. At times, when I lie still enough, I feel something touch me. Cold, slick hands pressing against my chest, my arms, my legs. Not holding me down, but rocking me like a cradle. The first time it happened, I thought it dream. I woke drenched in sweat, swearing I had felt the swaying of arms beneath me, the press of a body cradling me. But the marks on my skin told another story. Long streaks of rawness, where salt had rubbed me raw. Faint bruises shaped like fingers curling around my ribs. Each night it returns, the motion unmistakable, the lullaby bleeding into my very bones. Sometimes I hear her footsteps pacing outside my door, dragging and wet. The boards creak as though under a soaked weight. Other times, she is simply there. Closer, her sobs muffled against the door, the sound of the bundle she carries writhing and gurgling in her arms. The wood swells damp beneath my hand when I press my palm against it, as though water seeps through. I try not to sleep, but exhaustion overtakes me. In those hours between wake and dream, I feel her bend over me, her hair dripping salt water onto my face. Her empty sockets hover inches from my own eyes, brine streaming down, pooling on my lips until I gag on it. Her hands cradle me tighter, rocking me until the rhythm becomes unbearable, the motion of waves carrying me somewhere I cannot return from. The worst part is her voice. Not the scream, but the words hidden beneath. Each night they grow clearer, whispered low against my ear. She begs me to take the child, to hold it, to claim it as my own. She promises the rocking will stop, the salt will stop, if I will only accept what she offers. Her voice breaks as she says it, torn between grief and desperation, as if she does not want to give it away, yet must. But I have seen the bundle. I know what lies inside is not a child, not anything of this earth. Still, my arms ache as though hollow, as though some part of me has already begun to reach for it. The song rises now as I write, no longer a lullaby, but a shriek that rattles the glass of the lantern. The flame gutters low. Salt crusts the ink as it dries on the page. And I feel her hands again, cold and insistent, rocking me where I sit, whispering her demand over and over. Take him. The night she showed me what lay within the bundle, the storm outside was at its worst. Rain lashed the panes, the sea hurled itself against the rocks, and the tower groaned as though it might collapse. Yet even the fury of the storm could not drown her song. It wound through the stone, low and insistent, until I felt it pulling me toward the stair. I swore I would not go, but my body betrayed me. Lantern in hand, I climbed, each step slick with salt, each breath heavier than the last. By the time I reached the lantern room, she was already waiting. The soaked nightgown clung to her wasted form, seawater pooling at her feet. She rocked the bundle in her arms, her head bowed, sockets spilling steady streams of brine. But this time, she did not keep it swaddled tight. The cloth slipped as she rocked, unraveling in strips, until what lay inside writhed free. I staggered, back, bile rising in my throat. It was not bones, not a child at all. It was teeth. Rows upon rows of jagged, glistening teeth embedded in pink flesh that pulsed and twisted. They clashed and gnashed, snapping at the air with a hunger so furious I could feel it in my chest. The sound was wet, a grinding clamor that set every nerve on edge. She bent her head to me, her lips blackened and cracked, her voice rasping through the gurgle of seawater in her throat. "It needs feeding." The words cut through the storm, louder than the wind, louder than the crash of the waves. And then she spoke my name, sliding from her ruined lips like oil, each syllable dripping salt and rot. I froze, lantern trembling in my hands, the flames sputtering against the damp. She pressed the bundle forward. The rows of teeth snapped and clattered, twisting toward me. The air reeked of rot and brine, so thick it coated my tongue. My arms ached again, hollow and heavy, as though meant to receive what she offered. She whispered my name again, longer this time, pleading and commanding in the same breath. I stumbled back, my shoulders striking the frame of the stairwell. The lantern flame flared, throwing light across her hollow sockets. And for a moment I saw something move behind them. Shapes, writhing as if the sea itself churned where her eyes should be. The bundle lurched, teeth gnashing, straining against the last strips of cloth that bound it. Panic surged. I slammed the door shut, the wood vibrating under my hands as I slid the bolt home. Her scream rose then, shrill and furious, no lullaby now but a howl that split the night. And then I heard them. Tiny fingers scrabbling against the cracks of the door. They clawed at the wood, scratching, probing, searching for a way through. The sound was endless. Nails dragging, wood splintering, hungry hands that should not exist. I pressed my weight against the door, teeth clenched, breath shallow as the towers shook beneath the storm. Her voice hissed through the cracks, close enough I could feel the damp against my cheek. "It knows your name. It will not wait forever." The bundle wailed on the other side, a sound like the ocean swallowing screams. And still the fingers clawed, patient and unyielding, until dawn bled pale against the shutters. Only then did they fade. The silence left in their place was worse. Because I knew now what she carried was not her child. It was something older, hungrier, something she had been feeding for decades. And she had chosen me as the next to hold it. The dawn comes gray and thin, the sea a dull expanse of pewter. I stumble from the stairwell back into the watchroom, my lantern dead, my throat raw from screaming into the storm. I collapse at the desk, pressing my palms flat against the wood, only to feel the damp seep into my skin. The logbook lies open where I left it, but the ink is not mine. The words glisten wet across the page, written not in black, but in brine. Each letter shimmering as though carved from the tide itself. He agreed to take the child. My stomach turns. I slam the book shut, but the words burn in my mind, salt biting my lips, my tongue. I stagger to the mirror fixed by the desk, desperate to assure myself that I am still here, still whole, that I have not yet yielded to her. But the reflection does not match. I stand alone, arms hanging limp, yet the figure in the glass cradles something. A bundle clutched tight to its chest, swaddled in soaked cloth. It rocks gently as she once rocked it, and the reflection's lips move with a song I cannot hear. My own arms ache again, hollow and heavy, as if they longed to complete the gesture. I tear my gaze away, but the glass pulls me back. Each glance shows the same truth. Me, holding it, my eyes hollow with grief, not my own. The reflection smiles faintly, though my face is pale with dread. And from the corners of the room, the lullaby begins again. It never stops now. Day or night, waking or half asleep, the song seeps through the stone. Low, mournful, yet threaded with command. It winds into my dreams, filling them with salt water and teeth, with tiny fingers curling around mine. Even in silence, I hear the rhythm of it, pulsing with the beat of my heart. I try to resist. I barricade myself from the stair. I fill the lamp until it spills oil across the floor. I pace the room until my legs buckle. But her song threads through every crack, every breath. It does not beg anymore. It waits, patient as the tide, certain of its claim. And I know it is right. Each time I pass the mirror, I see myself closer to surrender. The reflection rocks the bundle tighter, my lips moving with words I cannot stop. My arms grow heavier with each hour until I feel the phantom weight pressing into them, the damp of cloth, the gnashing beneath. The salt spreads too, blooming across the floorboards, across my skin, marking me as hers. The logbook lies open again, though I have not touched it. More words have appeared, each stroke shimmering with brine. He agreed to take the child. The letters blur as my eyes fill, but I cannot deny them. I know now it will not stop. The song will not end, not until I hold it, not until I rock it as she once did, not until I take its hunger as my own. And when I do, the log will close by itself, the ink drying into salt, waiting for the next to read. I sit at the desk now, arms trembling with weight that is not there. My reflection smiles faintly as it rocks the bundle. And I understand what she meant when she whispered my name. The widow does not sing for herself. She sings for me. And soon, when I give in, the song will never end. Also, the lighthouse rose higher than the village roofs and older than their churches, its stone base built not by the hands of my century, but by men long gone, whose names no one remembers. Beneath it lies the well, choked with moss, covered with a warped wooden lid, left to rot. When Lighthouse droni, they delivered me here. The boatmen warned me never to pry at it. Bottomless, they said, their eyes downcast, their voices low as though the stones themselves listened. A mouth that does not close. I laughed at the time, thinking it no more than another seaman's tale meant to unsettle the outsider. The first week was uneventful. I kept the logs, trimmed the lantern, walked the perimeter of the reef. Loneliness gnawed at me, but I had known worse. The sea crashed against the rocks and the gulls wheeled overhead, filling the hours with the rhythm of work and routine. I told myself the days would blur into weeks, and the month would pass quickly. It was the second week when the dripping began. I heard it one night after extinguishing the lamp. The tower was quiet, the wind hushed. Yet beneath the floorboards, faint as a heartbeat, came the sound. A drop falling through silence, striking stone. Then another. Steady, patient, unbroken. I tried to ignore it. The sea leaks into every corner of these islands. Moisture finds its way up through cracks, beads along ceilings, drips into forgotten basins. But the sound grew louder with each night, echoing hollow through the foundation until it filled the chamber like a clock ticking down the hours. At last, curiosity pried me from bed. Lantern in hand, I descended to the base of the tower, where the air grew damp and cold. The smell of stone rot clung to my throat. There I found the old lid to the well. warped and slick, its boards swollen with years of brine. The dripping was louder here, as though it fell not into water, but into emptiness without end. I should have left it shut. I should have walked away, deafened myself to the sound. But I knelt and pried at the boards with trembling hands. They creaked, warped nails groaning as though reluctant to yield. At last the lid split apart, opening to blackness. I leaned forward, lantern raised, breath caught in my chest. The flame stretched downward, far beyond where it should. Its light did not fade into shadow, but sharpened, elongating into a narrow spear that reached impossibly deep. I stared, eyes burning, as the flame seemed to fall without end, the well swallowing it whole, drawing it further and further until it glowed like a distant star at the bottom of a night sky. Yet there was no bottom, only endless descent, the drop of water still echoing somewhere far below. My arm shook, the lantern trembling in my grasp, as though the well pulled at it, at me. The flame flickered, bent downward, eager to fall. I wrenched myself back with a gasp, slamming the lid shut. The dripping stopped at once. I returned to my cot, heart hammering, ears ringing with the echo of those falling drops. Sleep would not come. For when I closed my eyes, I saw only that light stretched thin, still falling, falling forever, into a throat that never ends. And when morning came, the boards over the well were damp with fresh brine. The sound had begun again, patient and steady. One drop, then another, as though something below was waiting for me to listen. The dripping did not stop. Night after night, it echoed beneath the stones, slow and steady, until I could no longer bear to sit in silence and endure it. But it was not dripping anymore. It had changed. Each drop stretched longer, deeper, until it struck not as water, but as knuckles on wood. The well had found its rhythm, and it knocked now, deliberate, patient, as though something down there waited for me to answer. I told myself it was madness, a trick of isolation. Yet when the sound grew loud enough to rattle the boards above the well, I could not keep away. I descended again, lantern in hand, my breath shallow in the cold air. The lid lay swollen and damp, as though the sea pressed from below. I leaned close, ears straining. Knock, knock, knock. The sound rose upward, hollow and thick, and for one terrible moment I swore I felt it echo through my chest. I backed away, heart pounding, but the urge to know clawed at me. My hands shook as I picked up a stone from the floor and tossed it in. I waited, counted. 10 seconds, 20, a full minute. No splash came, only silence, thick and endless. Then, long after I should have heard it strike, a new sound drifted up. The stone was knocking, light, almost timid, the tap of rock against unseen stone, then faster, louder, until it matched the rhythm I had come to dread. Knock, knock, knock. I slammed the lid shut and fled, bolting myself into the watchroom, telling myself I had imagined it. But hours later, when I had finally begun to drift, the sound returned. Not below this time, not under the stones, at my door. Wet knuckles rapped against the wood, slow and patient, the rhythm deliberate. I froze in my cot, breath caught in my throat. The knock came again, louder, shaking the frame. I held my lantern close, though the flame sputtered as if strangled by brine. I whispered prayers I had long forgotten, but the door bowed inward with each strike. Then silence. I dared not move. I lay still until exhaustion overtook me, sleep pulling me under like the tide. When I woke, the lantern was out. My cot was soaked. The blanket clung to me, heavy and stinking of salt. The sheets were damp as though someone had lain beside me, their weight pressing into the mattress, their brine seeping into my skin. I staggered upright, heart hammering, eyes darting to the door. The wood was swollen, warped with moisture, but unbroken. I pressed my palm to it and drew back with a cry. It was wet, dripping with cold, as though the sea itself had stood there, knocking, waiting to be let in. I thought then of the stone I had dropped, still falling, still knocking, still climbing toward me from a well with no bottom. And as the morning sun cut weakly through the mist, I heard the sound again, faint but rising, echoing up through the walls. Knock, knock, knock. Not at the door this time. From under the floor, from beneath the bed where I had slept. The dreams began the night after the knocking moved beneath my bed. They do not come like ordinary sleep, but like a tide pulling me under. Slow at first, then sudden and irresistible. I fall, always falling, into the throat of the well. The descent is endless. The walls rush past, slick with algae, their sheen glistening in the dim light of a flame that never goes out. I feel the slime brush my skin, cold and pulsing, as if the stone itself still lives. My fingers scrape against it, but the moss gives way to something softer. Flesh stretched thin over bone, wet and pliant. When I tear my hand away, the residue clings, stringing between my fingers like cobwebs spun in brine. And there are faces. They stare at me from the walls, half buried in the slick stone. Their eyes are open, filmed white, their mouths parted in perfect ovals. But no sound escapes them. They gape in silence, teeth black with algae, tongues shriveled. Their hair floats upward as if submerged. Yet I fall past them in air that tastes of iron and rot. Some faces I know from the village, though they have been dead for decades. Others are strangers, but they look at me as though I belong with them, as though I am the next face waiting to be swallowed by the stone. The deeper I fall, the more the walls pulse with life. A heartbeat thrums through the well, slow and heavy, shaking loose rivulets of brackish water that strike me like cold rain. My ears ring with the rhythm, and soon it is not only the walls that beat, but my chest. My own heart sinks with it, slower, heavier, until I feel the pull of something vast and alive. When I wake, it is never with relief. My pillow is soaked through, my sheets reeking of brackish water that leaves my skin sticky with salt. I gag on the stench, my throat raw as though I've been breathing the well's damp air all night. The mattress itself is dampy, sagging in the middle as if some weight lay upon it while I slept. I drag myself to the desk, hoping to distract myself with a log. But the pen slides in my hand, as though the inkwell is filled not with ink, but with slime. The words smear, the paper curls, and when I lift my head, I hear it again. The well hums. It is no longer the drip, no longer the knock. It is a low vibration rising through the stones, a sound too deep to come from anything made of water alone. It swells in waves, trembling through the floor, rattling the lantern glass. The very foundation of the tower seems to breathe with it. I press my hands to my ears, but the sound is not in the air. It is in me. My teeth chatter with the vibration, my ribs aching in rhythm with the hum. My skull thrums with it until my vision blurs, and still it does not cease. The logbook lies open, its pages fluttering though the air is still. On the blank sheet before me, salt blooms in tiny crystals, spelling words I cannot bear to read. I shut it, but the hum only deepens, low and patient, like a throat clearing before speech. The well is hungry. I know it now with a certainty that chills me more than the damp ever could. It has taken the faces, It has swallowed the voices, and it will not stop humming until it has me. The next time I sleep, I fear I will not wake in the bed at all. But at the bottom of that endless fall, my own mouth open in silence, my face pressed into the stone. The well has learned my name. At first it was the hum, steady and low, rattling the stones like a great beast stirring. Then came the voices. I lay in bed, half asleep, when I heard her, my mother. Her voice was soft, the way she used to call me in from the fields at dusk. Gentle and patient, filled with a warmth I had not felt in years. She called my name once, twice, each syllable drawn long, echoing up from the foundation beneath my feet. My chest tightened, tears burning my eyes before I could stop them. She has been dead for over a decade. I rose without thinking, lantern in hand, descending the spiral stair. The closer I came to the base, the clearer she grew. Not muffled, not broken, but whole, every note of her voice alive in the blackness below. "Come back," she whispered. "Come back down to me." The well gaped open, the old boards of its cover already warped aside. Salt dripped steadily from their edges, glistening in the lamplight. The voice swirled upward, pulling me closer. I knelt at the rim, trembling, lowering the lantern toward the dark. The flame stretched again, impossibly deep, until I felt as though I held not a lamp, but a star, dangling into the abyss. Then another voice joined hers, my own. It rose clear as day, as though I stood at the bottom of that pit calling back to myself. The words were drowned in echo, but the tone was unmistakable. My voice, tinged with laughter, though the sound was wrong. Too sharp, too eager. I leaned closer, my stomach twisting. The flame wavered in my grip as the dark shifted below. And then I saw it. Myself, pale and grinning, face stretched too wide, eyes blank, but fixed on me. Its teeth gleamed, water dripping steadily from its lips. The grin did not falter as it raised its hands, reaching upward through the dark. Its arms stretched like water, flowing, twisting, elongating as though bone and flesh had melted into liquid. Fingers dripped in strands, slick tendrils twisting and coiling, grasping toward the rim. The air thickened with the stench of rot, sharp and briny. My lantern flame hissed, bending downward, desperate to fall into its waiting hands. My chest seized with the urge to let go, to drop the light, to watch it plummet into the reflection's grasp. But I knew if I did, it would not stop with the flame. It wanted me. Its grin widened, splitting the skin at the corners of its mouth. Brackish water poured from the wounds, streaming upward, defying gravity, soaking the boards around the well. Its voice, my voice, rose again, clearer now. "Come down. Come back. You are already mine." I staggered backward, my heel striking stone. The lantern shook violently in my grasp, its light threatening to extinguish. For one breathless moment, the thing's fingers brushed the rim, slick and dripping. The wood hissed where it touched, smoking, the stench of rot rising sharp enough to burn my nose. I threw the lid shut, slamming it down onto those pale, grasping hands. The boards buckled beneath the force of the thing below, swelling upward as though the well itself strained to disgorge me. The knocking returned, frantic and wet, pounding against the lid like fists on a coffin. I ran then, fled up the stair, the sound of my own laughter chasing me, echoing from the depths. Even now, as I write this, I hear it. Not my mother's voice anymore, not even hers twisted with sorrow. Only mine, rising from the dark, pale and grinning, calling again and again, patient as the tide. It knows me now, and it will not stop until I answer. I sealed the well. I dragged the warped boards across its mouth, nailed them down until my hands bled, weighted them with stone from the shoreline. For one night I thought I had won. The knocks dulled, the hum quieted, and though the air still reeked of brine, I told myself the thing below was bound again, trapped where it belonged. I slept at last, though uneasily, clutching the lantern close, waiting for the sound to return. By morning the boards were ruined. The nails had rusted to nothing, crumbled into orange dust. The stones I had heaped were split, slick with rot, as though they had sat in the sea for centuries. And the wood itself, blackened, spongy, sagged under its own weight. My foot pressed against it and sank through as if the boards had been soaking in water all night. Salt crystals glittered along the cracks, and from beneath, a slow drip began again, steady and patient. That night, I barred the watchroom and forced myself to stay awake. But I heard it. Footsteps. Wet, deliberate, dragging up the spiral stair. I told myself I would not open the door, but the lantern dimmed in my hands as if its light recoiled from what approached. The footsteps stopped outside, and for a long while there was silence. Then the handle turned. I held my breath, but the door did not open. Instead, the sound moved away, climbing higher. A trail of water seeped beneath the frame, thin streams trickling past my boots. I followed it in horror with my eyes, watching it snake across the floorboards toward the cot. When dawn came, I crept from hiding. My cot was not empty. It was occupied by me. My double lay there, pale and dripping, the sheets soaked through. My clothes clung to its body, heavy with brine. Its chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, though the sound it made was not breathing, but the slow rush of waves through stone. I staggered back, bile burning my throat. Its face was mine, same hollow cheeks, same weary eyes, but twisted into a faint grin. Its lids fluttered as though caught in dream, but I knew what dream it saw. The same endless fall, the same faces pressed into the stone, the same hunger. I dared not touch it. I dared not wake it. I backed toward the stair, heart hammering, only to find the floor beneath me slick with footprints. Wet, bare, unmistakably mine. They trailed from the cot, across the boards, and down toward the foundation, toward the well. The realization struck like a wave. The well is not bottomless. It is not even a well. It is a door, one side pressed against the sea, the other against something far older, far hungrier. And it is opened wide enough now to let something through. The double is not me. Not yet. It is what crawled free when I nailed the boards shut, when I forced the door closed too late. And now it lies in my bed, wears my face, breathes with lungs that are no longer lungs at all. Tonight I hear it moving again, the cot creaking, my own footsteps pacing the floor. The voice is mine now, humming low, speaking my name in tones I do not remember speaking. The lantern light bends toward it, weak and pitiful. The air tastes of brine, and I know what comes next. The door swings both ways. If it climbed free, then something must go in its place. The boards will not hold. The floor already hums, and when the well opens again, it will not be the double that falls. It will be me, pulled down into endless dark, until I stare from the stone with a mouth open and silent, waiting for the next keeper to listen. The storm came with a fury that felt biblical, as though the sea itself had risen to erase me. All night the waves battered the tower, slamming against the stone with the weight of houses, sending spray up past the lantern glass. The wind howled until the walls shook, and the lantern flame strained, bending sideways like a reed in the gale. I braced the shutters, whispered half-remembered prayers, and wondered how long before the tower itself crumbled into the sea. By morning, the world was still. The sky stretched wide and impossibly blue, the sea rolling calm as glass. The gulls wheeled overhead, calling like nothing had happened. The air smelled fresh, scrubbed clean by the storm's violence. For a brief moment, I thought it was over. But the thunder never stopped. At first it was faint, a low rumble deep in the stones beneath my feet. I thought it was the last groan of waves receding across the reef. But the sea was calm now, the tide low and gentle. The sound was not outside, it was inside. I climbed the stair, lantern in hand, though I had no need of it in the daylight. The sound followed me, echoing hollow through the tower. By the time I reached the lantern room, my teeth were rattling. The glass panes flickered, bright as though lightning had struck. I flinched, shielding my eyes. But when I looked out, the sky was clear. Not a cloud marred the horizon. The light came again, searing white. But it did not split the sky. It bloomed across the walls of the tower itself, jagged veins of brightness, crawling across the stone, vanishing before my eyes. The thunder rolled a heartbeat later, low and endless, shaking the floor beneath my boots. I leaned against the glass, heart hammering, trying to make sense of it. Perhaps my ears still rang from the storm. Perhaps my eyes were dazzled by the lightning that had raged all night. I told myself it would fade, that silence would return. It did not. All through the day, the flashes continued. Lightning rippled across the walls in branching cracks of light, illuminating the stairwell, burning through the watchroom door. Thunder growled in endless waves, a storm trapped inside the stone. At times, I thought I heard voices threaded within it, cries torn apart by the roar, sobs drowned in the roll of sound. The villagers had told me nothing of this when they left me here. They had spoken only of storms, of the danger of reefs, of loneliness. Not this. Not thunder that belonged to skies long gone. Not lightning that flickered against walls of stone instead of clouds. By nightfall, the sound was stronger. I could not hear the sea. I could not hear my own breath. Every sound was swallowed by the endless roll of thunder, shaking the tower in a rhythm like a heartbeat. Lightning flared in my room, crawling across the walls, throwing shadows of my body that bent and twisted in shapes not my own. Sleep was impossible. Each time I closed my eyes, the flashes burned red against my lids. My skin prickled with static, my hair lifted with the charge. The storm had ended outside, but inside it lived on, restless, furious, as though the tower had trapped it in its bones. And as I sat alone in the glow of false lightning, ears ringing with thunder no one else could hear, a thought came to me that hollowed me out. What if the storm had never passed at all? What if I was the one who had been pulled inside, sealed into the tower with it, left to endure its rage forever? The thunder shakes again as I write this, deep and steady, rattling the pen in my hand. The storm is not outside. It never was. It is in here, with me. By the second day, I could no longer stand the noise. The thunder never faded, only rolled on in endless waves, shaking my teeth in their sockets, rattling the lantern glass until I thought it would shatter. Lightning cracked along the walls without warning, white veins crawling over stone and vanishing before I could blink. My body ached from bracing against each strike, though no storm touched the skies beyond the glass. I told myself I needed air. If I could only step outside, breathe the salt wind, hear the gulls again, perhaps the madness would break. I descended the stair, the thunder vibrating through my bones with every step, and opened the heavy door. And at once, silence. The air outside was calm, the sea glittering like glass. Sunlight poured across the rocks, dazzling and warm, a sky so blue it hurt my eyes. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and ordinary. I stood frozen on the threshold, blinking like a man waking from a fever. The storm was gone. There had been no storm at all, not since the night before. The villagers were right. The hurricane had passed. But when I turned back toward the tower, I saw it. Rain. Endless rain pouring down the spiral stairs, rushing over the stone like a flood. It fell not in streams, but in sheets, a deluge without source, soaking every rung of the stairwell. The thunder roared behind it, muffled through the downpour, lightning flashing along the walls as though trapped in the torrent itself. I stepped inside. My boots squelched at once, water rising over the floor in a tide that never spilled into the world outside. I reached to touch the wall, and my fingers came away dripping. But when I wiped them on my sleeve, the fabric was dry. That was when I understood the true horror. The water did not leave me. It clung, heavy and cold, soaking through skin, sinking into bone. My hair plastered to my forehead, droplets crawling into my eyes, yet no towel, no fire, no sun could banish the wetness. My flesh drank it in, carrying the storm deeper than skin. I climbed again, desperate to escape it. But the higher I went, the worse it became. The stairs churned beneath me like a riverbed, each step splashing upward into my face. The sound was deafening, the thunder and rain weaving into a chorus that beat against my skull. My breath came ragged, my chest tight as though I were drowning, though no water filled my lungs. In the lantern room, the downpour was strongest. Rain fell through the ceiling, though no clouds hung above. The windows streamed with water, though the glass was unbroken, the sun shining clearly through on the other side. The thunder cracked so close it shook the floor, lightning bursting along the panes until my own reflection glowed white, fractured and multiplied. I leaned against the wall, soaked, trembling, but my body offered no release. My skin did not dry. The storm lived in me now, each drop sinking inward, each rumble shaking my marrow. When I closed my eyes, I could feel it beating in time with my heart, a rhythm no longer separate from me. A storm outside might pass, a storm inside never would. And so I stood in the light of a calm blue day, shivering beneath invisible rain, the thunder rolling endlessly through my blood. The lighthouse had not trapped the storm. It had trapped me. That night, the storm inside the tower grew bolder. The thunder no longer rumbled in the distance of stone, but cracked sharp against the glass, rattling the panes until they screamed. Lightning flared in quick bursts, strobing the room in a white and shadow, every corner revealed and concealed in the same breath. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it did not matter. The sound came from within, a chorus that would not be silenced. Then came the pounding. It started as a faint thud against the lantern room windows, as if loose branches struck in the wind. But the sea outside was calm, the skies so clear. The stars burned sharp and cold. The pounding grew louder, sharper, deliberate. Fists against the glass, knuckles hammering with rage. Each strike made the glass quiver, the metal frame groan, as though the tower itself feared what pressed against it. I dared to look. At first I thought them shadows, distortions from the lightning that crawled the walls. Figures hunched and dark, their bodies bent against the glass. But when the light held, I saw them clearly. Silhouettes of sailors, their faces pressed against the panes. Their eyes were black pits, their mouths wide open in perfect ovals, gaping with screams I could not hear. Yet sound did come. Water. It spilled from their mouths in streams, dribbling down the glass, pooling at the edges of the frame. Though they were only silhouettes, the seawater was real, dripping onto the floor in steady rivulets. Soon the room smelled of rot and brine, the floorboards slicked beneath my boots. More appeared, drawn by the thunder's endless call. The glass darkened with them, dozens of bodies pressing against the panes, their hollow eyes staring inward. Their mouths gaped wider, unhinging until their jaws seemed to split, water gushing out in torrents. The panes fogged with their breath, their palms slapping the glass in rhythm with the thunder. They were not content to linger. They wanted in. The pounding grew frantic, shaking the lantern itself, rattling the flame until it guttered low. I staggered back, heart hammering, certain the glass would shatter. My own reflection trembled in the storm of their silhouettes, warped by the flicker of lightning. For a moment I thought I saw myself among them, my own mouth open, spilling seawater, my own fists beating the glass. The sailors' faces warped as the lightning flared, their features dissolving into something less than human. Their mouths stretched too far, teeth black with rot, tongues swollen and pale. Their eyes wept streams of brine. The glass bulged inward, trembling under the weight of their demand. I shouted into the roar that I would not open the door. But my voice was lost. The thunder swallowed it whole. The pounding never faltered. Seawater pooled deeper around my boots, soaking my trousers, climbing toward my knees. It rose though the floorboards held, though no storm raged outside. The water came from them. From their open mouths pressed to the glass, their endless exhale flooding the room. I stumbled to the stair, lantern clutched tight, the flame nearly drowned in the damp. Behind me, the pounding rose to a frenzy, the glass shrieking under the assault. Their shadows writhed in the white flare of lightning, arms twisting, mouths gaping wider, demanding entry into the tower that had trapped them, into the body that still had breath. I fled down into the dark, the thunder chasing, the floor awash in brine. But even as I descended, I heard it still, the steady, wet rhythm of fists against glass, and the rush of water spilling from mouths that should have been full of screams. And I knew the storm had not only trapped me, it had trapped them too. And they wanted me to join them. By the fourth night, I could endure no more. The thunder inside the walls had become a constant roar, shaking the glass until the shadows of the drowned pressed closer, their gaping mouths pouring endless brine. The lightning no longer flickered in fits. It pulsed steady, crawling across the stone like veins of fire, branding every corner with white. My head rang, my body ached, and every breath tasted of salt. I told myself if I did not leave now, I never would. At dawn, I packed what I could carry. The logbook sodden with seawater that never dried, my lantern, its flame hissing against the damp, a few scraps of food that spoiled the moment I touched them. My boots squelched with every step, but I did not care. I would walk the shoreline until I reached the village. I would flag down the supply boat. Anything to escape the coffin of stone that rattled with thunder, not its own. I pushed open the heavy door, and the world was gone. The dock, the rocks, the path that wound through black stone down to the surf. All of it swallowed. In its place stretched only ocean, black and heaving, rain slashing its surface to silver foam. The storm raged not above, but around, a dome of rain and cloud and lightning with no sky beyond. The wind tore at my coat, driving sheets of water into my face until I could not breathe. I staggered backward, heart seizing. The land had vanished. I gripped the doorframe, my body trembling. Through the torrent, I saw no horizon, no gulls, no calm sky beyond the storm. only endless sea waves rising like black walls, each crowned with white rage. Lightning cracked, not from the heavens, but from the water itself, striking upward, carving scars of light across the rain. I tried again, forcing myself to step forward. My boots sank into nothing, no solid ground, no stone. The lighthouse floated now, its foundation swallowed. The door opened not to shore, but to the storm itself, the tower adrift in a pocket of fury with no end. I slammed the door shut, gasping, water streaming from my hair, my clothes clinging heavy as chains. The thunder inside the tower greeted me at once, rolling through the stones with a rhythm that shook my heart. Lightning flared across the stairwell. Searing veins of white that left ghosts burned into my sight. I leaned against the door, chest heaving, understanding at last. The tower was no longer anchored to land. The storm had claimed it, sealed it inside its belly like a swallowed bone. I was inside a coffin, its walls of stone and glass, carried not on waves, but in the endless convulsions of thunder. The sailors' shadows pressed closer at the windows, their mouths wide, water rushing faster through the cracks, flooding the stair. They pounded with fists that did not bruise, their silhouettes screaming with silence. I screamed back, but the storm devoured my voice. The door behind me shuddered with pressure, the hinges groaning. I dared not open it again, dared not see what waited in the black sea beyond. For if I stepped through, I knew I would fall forever, drowned in a world that had no sky, no shore, only the storm. So I sit now in the watchroom, lantern flickering, listening to the thunder that beats in time with my heart. The lighthouse is no longer a place. It is a prison, carried adrift inside a storm that never passed, a storm that will never pass. And I am its coffin keeper. The night of the final storm came without warning. There was no lull, no creeping build. One moment the thunder rolled as it always had, heavy and endless, and the next the tower itself shook as if struck by a hand large enough to crush mountains. The lantern glass trembled in its frame, light bending into long, warped streaks. My ears bled from the roar, my chest seized with each pulse of thunder. The storm was no longer outside the walls. It was inside me, moving in rhythm with my breath. Lightning did not flicker this time. It split. The bolt cracked through the lantern glass, a jagged line of brilliance tearing across the room. The pane fractured into shards, but did not fall. Frozen mid-shatter, glowing white at the edges. I staggered closer, shielding my face, and that was when I saw it. The storm was not a storm. Through the broken glass, I glimpsed a shape vast and writhing, woven from clouds and salt, rain and fire. Its body coiled in endless loops, its veins pumping with lightning, its eyes burning deep in the thunderheads. It was alive, ancient, its hunger as vast as the sea. And its gaze was fixed on me. I fell to my knees, gasping. But the truth carved itself deeper than sight. I understood in an instant why the storm had lingered, why the thunder never ceased, why the rain seeped through stone though the sky was clear. It was not weather. It was a parasite, and I was its host. Each breath I drew fed it. Each beat of my heart gave it strength. The storm needed flesh and fire to keep raging, a tether to the world above the waves. I was that tether. The sailors at the glass had not been seeking refuge. They had been consumed, drained of life, until nothing remained but shadows pounding in vain. Their waterlogged mouths gushed seawater, not from drowning, but from being emptied. Every drop of their lives poured into the storm. And I was next. The lightning flared again, brighter, hotter, the fractured glass humming with power. My reflection split into pieces, each shard showing a different me. Drowned, burning, screaming, silent. My chest tightened, lungs filling with salt water, though no wave touched me. Each cough sprayed brine across the floor, feeding the storm's roar. I clawed at my throat, desperate to breathe, but the thunder matched each rasp, deeper, stronger, a perfect echo of my failing body. The storm lived through me. As long as I breathed, it would rage on. Lightning flaring, rain pouring, thunder consuming the world. I staggered to the stair, thinking to flee, to cast myself into the black sea outside. But the doors shook with the weight of waves, each impact a heartbeat of the thing I had seen through the glass. There was no escape. The storm carried the tower, carried me, carried everything within it. The lantern flared one last time, a blinding burst that burned through my vision, searing into the marrow of my bones. The glass split fully now, shards falling inward, each one glowing like embers. My reflection shattered with it, scattered across the floor in fragments too sharp to look upon. And in that final burst of light, I knew. When I drown, and I will drown, it will not end. The storm will slip free of me, carrying its hunger into the world, searching for the next keeper. Another fool drawn to stone and sea, another body to tether its endless rage. The thunder shakes my bones as I write this, each word smudged by the rain that drips from my skin. The storm breathes with me now, and when I take my last breath, it will breathe through another. It will never pass. The last month of my service began with silence, and silence always worried me more than the storms. After decades of tending this tower, I knew the sea never truly slept. It breathed and shifted, sighed and moaned, even on the calmest nights. But now, with retirement looming, the horizon lay flat as glass, the waves mere ripples, the gulls far too quiet. I told myself it was a gift. One last watch free of danger, no wrecks on the reef, no bodies to wash ashore. I lit the lamp anyway, out of duty if not necessity, its beam slicing across waters that had nothing to hide. My routine carried me as it always had. Trim the wick, polish the glass, record the hours in the logbook. Yet something in me unsettled, as though the silence of the sea carried a weight. That was when I first heard the whispers. They came with the night wind, curling through the cracks of the lantern room, weaving around the glass like smoke. At first I mistook them for gull cries, carried far, or the moan of old stone shifting. But the longer I listened, the clearer they grew. Words, sentences, my name among them. You must not leave. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It shifted, layered, always on the edge of recognition. Sometimes it carried the timbre of an old friend long dead. Sometimes the gentleness of a woman's lullaby. But always it came back to the same refrain. You must not leave. I laughed the first night, though my throat was dry. Perhaps the solitude had finally caught up with me. Perhaps, after years of mocking the madness whispered about keepers before me, I had joined their number. I left the lantern burning and retreated to the watchroom, closing the shutters tight. The whispers followed still, muffled but never gone, threading through the wood as though the tower itself carried their breath. The second night they came sooner. The lamp had barely burned an hour when I heard them again, rising from the sea itself, twined with the sound of the tide. I leaned out the window, lantern in hand. But the water below remained calm. Not a wave touched the rocks. Not a current disturbed the reflection of the beam. Yet the whispers swelled, overlapping, urgent, pressing into my skull until I staggered back. You must not leave. The third night, I did not sleep. The logbook shook beneath my hand, the ink bleeding as though damp, though no water had touched it. I wrote the words anyway, scrawling my duty, my hours, my hope that this was some passing madness. But when I turned the page, my hand froze. The entry for the following night was already written. It carried my handwriting, my loops and slants, every letter unmistakable. And it said only this: he did not leave. The lamp flared then, brighter than it should have, though the oil was low. Its light cut through the glass with the sharpness of a blade, splitting the horizon as if seeking something I could not see. My skin prickled with the certainty that the whispers were not madness at all. They belonged to the lamp, to the tower, to the sea itself. I told myself I would leave when the month ended. I told myself no voice could bind me. But as the beam swept across the calm waters, I felt a pressure in my chest, heavy as a hand. A warning, a promise. You must not leave. The words carried on the wind, steady and patient, as if the sea had all the time in the world to wait. And I, one last keeper, had no choice but to listen. By the second week, the logbook was no longer mine. I kept it as I always had, the ritual steadying me when the night stretched long and the wind made the walls moan like an old ship. But now, when I opened it, whole pages were filled before I set pen to paper. My own hand stared back at me, every stroke familiar, every loop and flourish the same as I had made for years. And yet I had not written them. The words came in paragraphs, long entries etched in ink so fresh it still glistened. They told stories of keepers before me, not the dry accounts of hours and tides, but the details of their deaths. I read of one who drowned in his sleep, lungs full of brine though his bed was dry. Another had been found hanged from the lantern chain, his boots dripping with seawater, his eyes swollen black. Others had simply vanished, their boots left neatly by the cot, the logbook closing itself with a final entry already written in their hand. The lamp's beam swept over the pages as I read, the words flickering in and out of sight as though the light itself revealed them. I tried to tear out the entries, but the ink spread across my palms like blood. When I glanced down, the words had already seeped back onto the page, darker, heavier, as though etched into the paper's veins. At first, I told myself it was my mind, that the long nights had finally worn me thin, that solitude had reached its teeth into me. But the logbook knew things I could not. It wrote of storms that had not yet come, of ships that would founder on rocks not yet visible, of names of men I had never met. And when, days later, the village sent word of a wreck, the logbook's entry matched it exactly, word for word, ink for ink. I stopped opening it after that, left it closed on the desk. But still it changed. When I passed by, the pages turned themselves, the scratching of my own pen echoing, though I held nothing in my hands. At night I woke to find the book lying open on my chest, the words pressing against my skin as though eager to sink through. One night, unable to resist, I read again. This time the entry did not speak of others. It spoke of me. It described the nights I had just lived, every whisper I had heard, every flicker of the lamp that had unsettled me. It told of my own doubts, my decision to retire, the promise of one last month. And then, with ink still wet, it told of what had not yet happened. He will not leave. The words sprawled across the page in my hand, bold and final, as if mocking my earlier vow to leave when my service ended. I closed the book, heart hammering, but when I looked again, the ink had bled outward, spelling something new. He is already claimed. The lamp flared at that moment, a white pulse that rattled the panes. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw faces reflected in the glass. Keepers long gone, their eyes hollow, their mouths twisted in silence. They leaned close, watching me, their features flickering with each sweep of the light. I slammed the logbook shut and shoved it into the drawer, but I could still hear the pages turning in the dark, my own hand scratching across them, words I would never remember writing. And through it all, the whisper returned, steady as the tide. You must not leave. The logbook was no longer a record of my duty. It was my sentence, already written, page by page, waiting for me to read the end. The lamp was never meant to turn inward. Its beam belonged to the sea, a guide for ships, a warning of the jagged reefs below. But now, in the middle of the night, it bent like a limb, twisting against the gears and mirrors as though the tower itself had decided where the light should fall. The beam crawled down the stairwell, sharp and white, searing into the watchroom where I lay half asleep. I woke choking, the glare blinding me, filling every corner of the room. It was not the steady glow of flame, but the violence of lightning, a brightness that erased shadow, that stripped every surface bare. My cot, my desk, the logbook, all drowned in white fire. I lifted an arm to shield my eyes, but the light cut straight through flesh and bone, outlining the veins in red against my skin. And then I saw them, faces in the glare, crowding the room as though the walls had dissolved. At first they seemed etched into the brightness itself, faint impressions burned across my vision. But they grew sharper with each pulse, stepping forward from the light, arranged in a ring around me. Men and women, the keepers who had come before me, their features half erased by time but unmistakably human. Their eyes were hollow, not sockets, but windows filled with nothing. Their mouths worked in unison, soundless at first, until the light grew hotter and their chant broke free. Stay. The word pulsed with the thunder that had long ago nested in the stones. Each utterance rattled my bones, shook my teeth, sank into my skull like a spike. Stay, stay, stay. Their lips moved as one, gaping too wide, the syllable drawn out until it scraped against my ears like rusted chains. I tried to rise, to escape, but my body was pinned. The light pressed against me like a weight, heavy and hot, searing into my chest until my lungs burned. My arms jerked uselessly at my sides, my fingers clawing at sheets that smoldered under the glare. The faces bent closer. I saw then what the hollowness in their eyes meant. They were not empty. They were mirrors, reflecting the beam itself, the endless white, as though the lamp had stripped away their souls and filled the sockets with its own fire. Their mouths twisted wider, cracking the skin at the corners, yet no blood came, only light spilling out in threads, searing the air as it fell. Stay! I shouted back that I would leave, that my service was ending, that they could not hold me. My voice came raw, broken, but the chant only grew louder, drowning it. The logbook slid from the desk of its own accord, falling open at my feet. The pages glowed with the same white fire, my own handwriting gleaming like etchings in bone. He stayed. The words spread across the parchment, written again and again until the pages blackened at the edges from heat. My own voice began to falter as I read them, merging with the chant that filled the room. Stay. I shut my eyes tight, praying that blindness might free me. But the light lived behind my lids now. The faces remained, etched into the dark, their mouths opening wider, their chant filling the silence between my heartbeats. When I opened them again, they had pressed closer still. Their hollow eyes reflected me now, my own face pale and trembling, caught in their endless loop of servitude. The lamp's beam bent further, until its core rested on my chest, branding me with its heat, binding me to its fire. And in that moment, as my body shook under its weight, I understood the truth. The light was not meant for the sea. It was meant for us, the keepers. It needed watchers, and watchers could never leave. The chant swelled until the walls shook. Stay. By the 4th week, I had made up my mind. I would leave, no matter what the whispers said, no matter what the logbook promised, no matter how the light bent itself to hold me. My time was finished. Retirement waited, and I would not surrender myself to the madness that had claimed the faces I had seen in the glare. That night, I packed in silence, moving quickly, afraid the tower itself might be listening. I folded my clothes into a trunk, set aside the food I had rationed, and laid my boots neatly by the door. My lantern I placed on the desk, the flame low but steady, its glow the only reassurance that I was still in control. I slept at last with the first hint of hope I had felt in weeks. By morning, it was gone. The trunk stood empty. The clothes vanished. The food tin lay open, bare as if it had never held a crumb. Even my boots, worn from years of climbing the spiral stairs, were gone, their imprint on the floorboards erased. The room looked as though I had never touched it, as though I had never planned to leave at all. My heart sank as I searched, overturning drawers, tearing open cupboards, even prying at the floorboards. Nothing. The belongings that proved I had a life beyond this tower were unmade, erased from existence by hands I could not see. The tower itself had taken them, unthreaded them like cloth. The door was next. I went to it, rage burning hotter than fear, and set my hand against the handle. It would not turn. I pressed harder, shouldering into it, kicking until my bones ached, but the door held fast, heavy and unyielding. The wood groaned as though alive, but it did not open. When I stepped back, chest heaving, I thought I heard laughter in the grain, low and mocking, the creak of boards forming words without shape. You must not leave. I staggered away, sweat cold against my back. I climbed to the lantern room, meaning to signal to send a plea across the sea to the village. But the mirrors turned themselves, angling the beam away from the horizon, back into the heart of the tower. No matter how I twisted the gears, no matter how I cursed and pushed, the light bent to where it wanted to shine. Into me. The logbook lay open on the desk when I returned. The words bled as though the pages themselves wept ink. I forced myself to read and wished I hadn't. The boat will come, but he will not reach it. He is already bound. I slammed the book shut, heart hammering. The air thickened, salt curling in my nostrils, the walls sweating brine. The chant began again, low at first, rising with each beat of the thunder that never stopped. Stay, I shouted back, screamed that I would leave, that nothing could hold me. My voice cracked, raw, but the tower did not care. My belongings had vanished. The door would not yield. The beam burned only inward. I was no longer a man waiting for release. I was a prisoner, a keeper bound to his post, stripped of every tether to the world beyond. Tomorrow the boat will come. I know it will. I can almost hear the distant engines, almost taste the air of freedom. But the tower has made its promise clear. The boat will not be mine. I am sealed inside these walls, the lamp my jailer, the whispers my chains. And tomorrow, when the boat waits in vain, it will leave without me. Dawn came with a silence so heavy it pressed against my ears. For the first time in weeks, the thunder stilled, the rain ceased, and the whispers drew back into the stone. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that this was my reprieve, that the tower, satisfied with my fear, had relented. But as the first blush of light broke across the horizon, I saw it. A boat cutting across the water, its wake glittering in the sun. My replacement had come. I stumbled up the spiral stairs, 2 at a time, heart pounding with a desperate hope I had not allowed myself to feel. I reached the lantern room, pressed my palms against the glass, and shouted until my throat tore. The beam was still burning, though I had not lit it, though the oil had long since been consumed. Its light was a spear across the sea, dazzling, merciless, brighter than any flame should burn. I waved my arms, pounded on the glass, screamed my name into the morning air. But the figure in the boat did not look up. They stood at the bow, hands shielding their eyes against the glare, searching the tower, but seeing nothing. My voice carried no further than the glass. My fists struck until my skin split, but no sound passed through. The light was too bright. I saw myself reflected in it, a warped silhouette, stretched and hollow. My face glimmered faintly in the glow, pale and translucent, as though the lamp had etched me into the beam. Every time I moved, my reflection moved slower, delayed, grinning faintly when I did not. My horror grew as I realized what had become of me. I was no longer inside the tower. I was inside the light. The whispers rose again, no longer from the wind, but from my own throat, my own mouth speaking without my will. They poured into the glass, threads of sound woven into the beam, carried across the sea to meet the boat that approached. "Stay," they murmured. "Stay." I beat harder against the panes, blood smearing across the glass, but my replacement never looked up. They adjusted their cap, straightened their coat, readying themselves to take my place. The logbook lay open behind me, the ink already drying. He never left. The words glowed faintly, as though burned into the page, my own handwriting betraying me once more. The beam pulsed, and with each flare I felt myself thinning, my body fading into the brilliance, my voice hollowing until only the chant remained. The boat reached the dock, its hull scraping the stone. My replacement stepped out, steady, unhurried, carrying a trunk just as I once had, boots striking the boards with resolve. I screamed one last time, pounded until the glass shuddered, but they did not see. To them, the tower stood silent, waiting. The light burned too strong, a perfect beacon hiding the truth within. And in that moment, I understood. This was how the cycle endured. One keeper after another, swallowed by the lamp, bound to its fire, turned into nothing more than reflection and whisper. The light never went out because it burned on us. On me? On them all who came before. My body might wither, my voice might break, but the beam would blaze as long as I remained trapped in its core. I pressed my forehead against the glass, breath shallow, tears burning hot as they fell. Outside, the new keepers set foot on the island, oblivious to the fate awaiting them. Inside, the light consumed me, carving me hollow, feeding itself on my last shreds of will. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, I was gone. Only the beam remained, steady and bright, guiding ships safely past the reef. Another keeper claimed, another watch begun.